All right, good morning, everyone. Let me just inquire, are we ready to have the jurors brought in? Is the state ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense ready?
Yes, Judge.
Okay, Mr. Bailiff, please have the jurors brought in. We'll go on the record.
Good morning. It is day 9 of the Chad Daybell trial. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Please remember to hit the thumbs up on your way in or your way out. We are continuing the state's case on Chad Daybell. And
Why don't you wait and then we'll bring the jurors in. I think they're close.
yes, you may, Christina J. I really need it. Thank you. Good morning, hippie. Good morning. Good morning. Nice to see you all. And we continue with the cross-examination of David Warwick, unless I have it wrong. Hello, Lollipop. Can I offer each of you a coffee? Maybe that should be one of the custom emojis I make, is some sort of coffee emoji. Since most of the time, hello, Rando. Since most of the time, hello, Truth Junkie. Since most of the time I'm sitting here in the morning trying to wake up for a trial while you all flow in. See how when they stand up, Chad and Pryor, how hello, Tommy P. How they always have to like whisper in each other's ears.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated, everyone.
I'm feeling a little better, Stacy. Just tired. But thank you and hello.
Good morning, everyone. We're back on the record this morning on case CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. The prosecution's here present, the defendant as well as defense attorney, Mr. Pryor. Court notes the jurors are all returned and accounted for and properly seated. I've also received and reviewed the jury affirmation signed by each of the 18 jurors. So thank you again for continuing to follow the court's admonishment on your affirmation each day. When we concluded yesterday, the witness, Mr. Warwick, was under cross-examination, which will be continuing this morning. So Mr. Pryor, if you're ready to proceed with continued cross, you can do that. As you make your way over to the podium, and you can do that now, Mr. Pryor, I'll just note to the witness, Mr. Warwick, you are still under oath for your questions. And I just want to confirm, did you review any of the trial testimony since you left the stand yesterday? Okay, you did not. Can you check your microphone also to make sure that's working?
No.
Okay. All right. Mr. Pryor, then if you'd like to continue with cross, we can commence this morning. Thank you.
Judge. Morning.
Morning.
Before, I guess where I'd like to start, Mr. Warwick, is did you have an opportunity either yesterday or today to talk to the prosecuting attorney about your testimony?
No.
Prior to testifying in this proceeding, Did you have an occasion to talk to the prosecutor at any time about your testimony?
No,
Do you recall testifying in a preliminary hearing in August of 2020?
yes,
Okay. Subsequent to that, did you have an occasion to communicate either directly or through your wife with the prosecuting attorney about the manner and the substance of any of your testimony?
no,
Did you have an occasion to exchange an affidavit or a document between you and your wife and the prosecutor and the police?
I don't recall that.
Okay. Is it possible that the prosecuting attorney or law enforcement showed you an affidavit of facts and had you go over that for accuracy?
Yes,
Okay, so you did go
Morning,
over
Harlan.
an affidavit, correct?
I don't know if it was an affidavit, but
It was a document.
yeah,
And in that document, it detailed the facts of this particular case and what you would be testifying about, correct?
yes,
Okay, and then there were some revisions to those documents. In other words, you would make suggestions and send them back to the prosecuting attorney, and then they would send it back, and there was a little bit of a back and forth. Do you recall that?
nope,
Okay. Do you recall your wife bringing you an affidavit or court document saying, the prosecutor would like you to take a look at this and see if this accurately reflects what your testimony is going to be?
no, I don't.
But you do recall going over an affidavit that that was prepared by the prosecuting attorney for your review, correct?
I would say yes, according to, if I'm understanding this correctly.
Okay. So in other words, there was a document prepared. You were to review that document. And then at that point, you were to return it either through your wife or directly back to the prosecuting attorney. Is that right?
I never did take it. It was just,
You never did what?
I did not take the document.
Did you read the document?
I did read it.
Did you correspond in any way with the prosecuting attorney about how and what changes would be necessary to that document?
No,
Okay. Did your wife do it for you?
no,
All right. I want to go back to something you said originally. You talked and you used a couple of adjectives to describe Chad, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think one of them you said was quiet.
yes,
Saw that yesterday. I don't recall if you used the words humble. Was that one of them? Humble?
the words I used is, he was kind and, yeah, he was meek and humble. I've never seen anything different.
Okay. And throughout all of your interactions with Mr. Daybell, that's the way you found him. You found him as a very meek person, correct?
Correct.
You found him as a very humble person, right?
Yes,
You found him as a very quiet person. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay. And deeply religious.
Yes,
And you may not have agreed with all of his religious beliefs, correct?
correct.
And he would not necessarily believe with all of your religious beliefs. Would that be fair?
Yes,
Okay. But you respected each other for having your respective religious beliefs. Would that be fair?
yes,
Morning, Sparkles.
Now, I talked to you a little bit about visions and about vibrations. I want to talk to you a little bit about seances. Do you understand the term seance?
I do.
Okay. Now, did you or with your wife or knowledge of your wife ever participate in a seance?
No,
Okay. Do you have any knowledge as to whether or not your wife participated in a seance?
I do not.
Okay. And I previously asked you about the seven gatherers, but I'm going to ask you again. You have no knowledge whatsoever of what the seven gatherers are. Is that right?
Asked and answered, Honor. Overruled.
You have no knowledge of what the seven gatherers are. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. Now, you testified in a preliminary hearing. I believe it was in August of 2020. You recall that?
Yes,
What was the date of your marriage again?
it was December 12th, 2020.
Okay. So you testified in a preliminary hearing about 4 months before you got married. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay. Now, we had your wife on previously, and she talked about the fact that you live in a different state than she is. Is that right?
yes,
And she lives somewhere in Arizona. We don't need to say where. And you live somewhere in Utah. Is that correct?
correct.
And how long have you folks lived separately?
Um,
Oh, he's going to
probably
go
about
there.
2 years now.
Okay. And how long did you actually live together?
2 years.
Overruled.
How long did you live together?
Several months.
Meaning 2 or 3 months?
No, it was a little longer than that.
How much longer?
I don't recall.
Someone in
Okay.
chat
Would it
said
be, would it
10
be as
months.
much as 8 or 9 months?
It could have been.
Okay. But several months.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, isn't it true that the reason you got married is because you were trying to avoid having to be forced to testify against each other in a criminal proceeding?
No,
Okay.
Well, Pryor went there. Warwick didn't bite.
I want to go over with you again some of your testimony with the prosecuting attorney. You made mention of a timeline. You said you went to a park during one of the days. I think you came in on a Friday, right?
Friday night,
But you don't remember about what time.
I would think about 7:30.
Okay. And then you said that you saw Chad several times over the weekend. Is that right?
Yes,
How many times?
I would say more like a few times. Like, I would say 3 or 4 that I
Okay.
can actually recall.
Okay. And one of them you described as being in a park on a Saturday. Is that right?
I think, no, that was on Sunday.
That was on Sunday.
Mhm.
Okay. Did you see Chad on Saturday?
Yeah, yes,
When did you see him on Saturday? What time?
I would say it was late morning or early afternoon.
Okay. Okay. And what was the purpose? That was the time when you folks had that discussion about Tammy and some of the other items that you talked about. Is that right?
Yes.
That was the significant discussion where the vast majority of what you spoke to Chad about took place on that Saturday. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay. Now, you didn't see Chad on Friday. Is that right?
that's right.
Okay. And then you got up on Saturday and in one report to the police, you mentioned that you slept in Saturday and then ate breakfast at Lori's condo. Do you remember telling law enforcement that?
I don't.
Okay. Do you dispute the fact that maybe you slept in and ate breakfast on Saturday morning?
No, I just don't remember.
Okay. And then what you did is you guys got prepared and went to a seminar called the Firm Foundation Saturday, right after you got done eating breakfast. Remember that?
Yes,
Okay. And according to your daughter, excuse me, your wife's testimony, you spent the better part of the day and the evening at the Firm Foundation. Do you remember that?
yes.
Okay. So my question is this, is that if you were at this Firm Foundation all day and into the evening late, how is it that you met with Chad in the apartment on Saturday?
Because we were not at the whole event.
Okay.
We didn't attend the whole event.
And if your wife said you did attend the whole events and that she took pictures for over 9 or 10 hours, that's something she's mistaken about, right?
If she did, yes.
Okay. And you left the event during this event and came back, went to Lori's to eat. Is that right?
I don't remember.
Hello,
Okay.
Ashley.
All right. So you also don't remember talking to Chad on Saturday, do you?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right.
He just tried to impeach him.
And then when you got
I
back
think
from the
it-
convention late, you folks decided that you would consider
Landed like
starting
you
your
thought it would.
podcast. Is that right?
No,
Oh, you didn't have an equipment failure of your podcast on Saturday evening?
no,
Okay. And then you, again, expressed to law enforcement that you slept in Sunday morning, right?
I don't recall.
Okay. And did you see Chad at all on Sunday?
Yes,
When did you see him?
at the park.
Which park is that? Do you know?
I just know it was at Rexburg.
Okay. About what time was that?
I would say late morning,
Late morning.
if I'm recalling correctly.
Okay. Late morning, you saw Chad on Sunday. Do you recall meeting out at a 80 acres piece of land late Sunday afternoon?
Yes.
Okay. And you were there with Lori,
No, Lori wasn't there.
Alex,
Alex
Melanie.
and Melanie.
Okay. And nobody else was there, right? JJ wasn't there.
Who? Who'd you say?
JJ.
No.
Okay. And when you met with Chad at the park on Sunday, how long of a meeting was that?
I would say half hour.
Okay. Did he just come right over and say, let's go out to a park, or was there another purpose behind that?
No, they wanted us to come over to the park.
Okay. Who's they wanted?
Chad and Lori.
Okay. So Chad showed up at the park, or did he come over to the condo and then you all went over to the park together Sunday morning?
I really don't remember.
Okay. Okay. But then later on in the afternoon, you met a realtor by the name of Ron Arnold at a piece of 80 acre piece of property, right?
Yes, him and yes, he showed up later.
Well, he showed up with Chad later, did he not?
Yes, he did.
And what I find interesting is that you had noted in previous reports that he showed up with Chad and Chad was wearing his church clothes. Do you,
Oh, hold on. There's an objection. Can you repeat that into the microphone, Mr. Wixom?
Yes, Judge, that was argumentative, at least the first portion of the question or statement.
Overruled.
Late objection.
Chad showed up at that meeting on the land in the 80 acres with Ron Arnold, and he was wearing his church clothes, right?
That's right.
Okay.
So he had gone to church that morning.
Yes.
So how is it that he met with you if he was at church in the morning?
Well, this was the afternoon.
No, I'm talking about the park.
Well, this was after the park.
Well, that's what I mean. He showed up at the.
He was serving in his calling, and him and Ron were serving together, and they came over. And I
Okay.
did not know they were coming over because I said I do not want to do any business on Sunday.
Well, I think you're missing my point, and I'll try to be a little clearer.
I
Okay.
appreciate that.
All right. You're welcome. What I don't understand is that if Chad was at church, engaged in church activities Sunday morning, and engaged in this calling Sunday, how is it that he met you, Lori, and Melanie at a park on that very same Sunday?
I don't know that he was at church Sunday morning.
Okay, well, isn't it true that you told the investigators that he was showing up in church clothes with another gentleman who's a real estate agent?
That was in the afternoon, yes.
Right, and isn't it true they told you that they just came over from attending church?
No,
Okay. And if Mr. Arnold were to get on the stand and say that's exactly what he told you, would that be an inaccurate statement by Mr. Arnold?
well, they were attending their calling, so in a way they're attending church, but it wasn't the services.
Okay. Okay. So these visits that you claim you had with Chad were on Saturday when you were at a convention, is that right? And you happened to just take a break from a 10-hour convention that you were with your wife, right? To visit with Chad. Is that right, on Saturday?
I'm trying to recall what time we saw Chad on,
Okay.
what time I saw Chad on Saturday.
Oh, so possibly it could change now, is that right?
Well, no, I just don't remember. I just know that I was not at the whole conference.
Okay.
I didn't attend the whole conference, so
Sir, isn't it true you didn't see Chad on Friday?
That's
yes, it's true. I did not see him on Friday.
And isn't it true you didn't see him on Saturday?
No, that's not true.
And isn't it true, sir, that on Sunday, the only time you saw him is when he went out to an 80 acres with a couple of other witnesses, and that's the only contact at all you had with Chad Daybell over that weekend?
Objection, argumentative,
not
Your
true.
Honor.
But I have
Hold on.
nothing else.
Hold, stop. All right, Mr. Pryor, Ms. Warwick. I'm sustaining that objection. I'm striking the response. Mr. Pryor, next question.
I'm done, Judge. Thank you.
He
All right.
really wound up to that. He prepared for
Redirect.
that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Isn't it true? He was really trying to get David on. You really never saw Chad, did you?
Good morning, Mr. Warwick.
Good morning.
So I want to start by covering some of the questions that you were asked initially this morning. Do you recall the defense attorney just asking you whether or not yesterday you had met with prosecutors about your testimony? Do you recall that question?
Yes,
And you answered no.
yes.
Do you recall meeting with me yesterday?
I don't.
Uh-oh.
I mean, we talked to the hall, but we didn't talk about the case.
Okay. What about the day before?
No,
Let me ask this. Were there ever times that you and I, prior to you coming into court yesterday and testifying, were there times that you and I did meet and we did discuss your potential testimony?
yes.
When's the best time that you withdraw that? To the best of your recollection, when did we do that?
Probably a couple months ago, would be my guess.
And upon your arrival to Idaho Falls, to Boise a couple of days ago, did we also meet again?
No,
You don't recall that?
I don't.
Let's move on.
This is weird because it seems like they did meet, but David isn't remembering, or maybe the prosecutor is asking.
You were asked some questions by the defense about the way that you characterized Chad. Do you remember those questions?
Yes,
And I think the words quiet and kind and meek came up. Is that right?
yes,
Now, to be clear, over the last several years, you've met with law enforcement a few different times, haven't you?
yes.
Do you remember which law enforcement by any chance that you've met with?
I probably remember more by face than name.
Do you ever remember discussing with law enforcement your feelings about whether or not you liked Chad? Do you remember that?
Well,
No, he doesn't, Stacy.
liking Chad or liking his ways.
Liking Chad.
I'll say yes. It's vague, but I remember.
What
It's overruled. You can continue to answer.
What do you remember about telling law enforcement about whether or not you liked Chad?
Well, the only thing I can recall that I was struggling with is when he approached me about doing a book, I told him that I needed time to come to understand if that was right and if it was right, and then I needed to decide at who if it was to be done. And for the next year, it was like when he reached out to me, he just didn't acknowledge the grounds that I had set. And he was kind of forward about, he was ready and wanted to go forward like I had already agreed, and I never had. That's the only thing I can recall right now anyway, that I think that's what you're referring to.
Is it possible that you use
Chad looked
even more
confused.
descriptive language about how you felt about Chad in that interview or that time?
Maybe it could be possible, but I'm not recalling it.
If you had an opportunity to review a police report from June of 2020, do you think it's possible that could refresh your recollection about that part of your conversation?
Yes,
Your Honor, with that, may I offer the witness a copy of the report from Detective Hermosillo from that same date?
Any objection from the
So-
defense?
It kind of sounds like this prosecutor wants to bring out tea. He's
All
like,
right, there's a, Mr. Wixom, if you'll reference the precise date of the interview and also instruct the witness that he's just to refresh recollection with that, not read it into the record, for example, or read from it.
Will do, Your Honor, certainly. So perhaps I missed, I thought I indicated that the date of the interview is June 8th of 2020 with Detective Hermosillo. If I might ask the marshal to hand this to the witness. And sir, the court's instructing you, as normal, that you're not to read this report to the jury. Just take a moment when you receive it, review it, refresh your recollection. When you're done reading it, either turn it over or offer to hand it back to the marshal, and then I'll ask questions, okay?
my recollection is also that
The
David
microphone,
Warwick
please, Mr. Pryor.
is,
Judge. Just to clarify, Judge, I didn't recall a June 8th interview with Officer Hermosillo, but I did have a recollection of a June 3rd. So counsel may want to correct his date. My recollection is it should be a June 3rd is when Officer Hermosillo interviewed Mr. Warwick from my recall.
I'm referring to the date referenced in the very report that we've just handed to defense counsel. That's the best date that I'm aware of, Judge. It's the date recorded in the report.
Okay, well, we'll go off the date listed in the report.
so we've got a dispute on dates of a report, and we've got the prosecutor pulling out the tea with the receipts on what David said about Chad. He's like,
Judge, could I want to urinate of objection when Mr. Warwick is done?
You may, once he's reviewed that report.
Chad called you a poopy head. And I got the receipts right here, and I'm pulling it out in court. I mean, I'm just curious about why it's so important to bring out what David said about Chad. It might be that they don't want it to be left on the table that his opinion is that he is
Judge, in
quiet.
the interest of time, may I direct the witness to a specific portion of the report to read to himself?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
And
Mr.
this-
Warwick, I would call your attention to page 4 of that report
you can tell this
and
prosecutor,
invite you to read the last 2 paragraphs, please, to yourself.
this prosecutor is less experienced, not quite as confident, a little more rigid and pedantic. Now, what is this tea that he's gonna eventually read into the record here? Chad is a blockhead.
Okay.
A poopy head.
You'll just turn that over then.
He's a jerk. I mean, of course, he didn't use any terrible
Well,
language.
go ahead, Mr. Wixom, but I understand Mr. Pryor may have an objection, but you can ask whatever question you've got up next after that review.
Thank you, Your Honor. And just for clarity's sake, for the record, upon looking at my copy, the supplemental report that was handed to Mr. Warwick was written and dated at the top for June 20th, 2020. But defense counsel is correct that the interview did occur on the 3rd of June of 2020.
No
Oh,
questions, Judge, at this point.
Okay, thank you. You can proceed, Mr. Wixom.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Warwick, having had a chance to review that paragraph, did it refresh your recollection?
Yes, it did.
Would you please explain to the jury, what was it that you told Detective Hermosillo in June of 2020 about Chad?
I was really angry that he called Melanie and told her not to talk to the police
Why were you angry?
because when someone makes a call like that, there's something wrong. And I had no idea what was going on. My mom had just I was on the phone with my mother because she just got diagnosed with cancer. And so I was on my way over to,
Judge, objection,
sorry.
Hold on. What's the grounds?
relevance?
Overruled. You can continue, Mr. Warwick.
Here's the relevance. I was on the phone with a broken down mother trying to get to her. Melanie's on the phone with Chad. And then when we both got off the phone, Melanie was really quiet. And I could tell she was really upset. So I just asked her, I said, what's going on? She
Judge,
said,
objection calls for hearsay.
Yeah, this invites hearsay sustained.
Do you happen to recall anything else that you told to Detective Hermosillo in that interview about your feelings about Chad?
yes,
What else do you recall?
that he was manipulative.
Can you explain what you meant to Detective
There
Hermosillo
you
when you used the
go.
word manipulative?
Manipulative. Okay, good. It's not just
Like-
poopy head.
He gets people's confidence, and then he uses that confidence for his favor.
There you go.
So I'm going to invite you to explain to the jury and reconcile how you can your statements that Chad was kind and humble and meek, but you also think he's manipulative.
Yeah, because all my interactions with Chad were kind, humble, and meek. It was that situation that happened much later. I just wasn't in that time frame. So that's when I saw a different Chad.
What was that different Chad? Describe that different Chad.
To call and tell somebody, literally tell them not to take the call with a very authoritative voice.
When you said authoritative voice, did you hear him on the phone?
No, I didn't. I just, after Melanie shared with me what the call had just happened.
You were asked about the reason behind your marriage with Melanie. You remember that question from the defense counsel?
Yes.
Why is it that you married Melanie?
Why is it?
Hmm.
Because she's a wonderful, wonderful woman, and she was very good with my Down syndrome boy and with all my children, and we're very compatible on many things.
Hi, Delene.
Is there any question in your mind that the two of you have a loving relationship?
No,
And in fact, it was suggested that perhaps your marriage was to avoid testifying against each other. Do you recall that?
I'm going to object.
Yes.
And I think I got the objection in time, Judge.
Yes, grounds.
But it's leading.
Judge, I'm just,
Overruled. You can answer.
well, you
Your Honor, could we ask Madam Reporter to repeat that? I want to make sure that I did it correctly, if she'd be kind enough to do so.
You may. Okay. And I'm going to repeat that for the record. The last question was, and in fact, it was suggested that perhaps your marriage was to avoid testifying against each other. Do you recall that?
I do recall that.
Have you ever been charged with any type of criminal charge related to this case in any way?
No,
Your Honor, may I have permission to approach on one last topic?
Approach the court?
Yes, sir.
Sidebar?
If we may, yes.
Very well.
Sidebar. So you could tell that Pryor had worked on that line of questioning because he wanted to nail David Warwick. He wanted it to be known. It's not known. He didn't succeed, I don't think, but he wanted it to be known that Chad and David never saw each other that weekend. You never saw Chad that weekend. He did not want to place Chad in that scenario that weekend where, it was the last time they ever saw JJ alive. So, he honed that baby down, and he had his okays and his rights well ready to go.
Okay. That's okay. 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 Right? Okay. Right? Okay. Right? right? Okay, okay.
Okay. And I've noticed that when he really is starting to get closer and closer to the point that he thinks that he wants to make, as he says something like, he's asking the question and then he ends it with, "Isn't that right?" His voice with every single word and syllable rises up. So he goes, "Isn't that right?" Isn't that right? You're wondering, Patricia, if the marriage was consummated? I bet it was. I bet it was. I mean, unless their marriage breaking down has any bearing on this particular case whatsoever, I really don't care. I mean, meaning it's not really our business, right? What happened with their marriage. Unless their marriage breaking down had something specifically to do with this case.
You can continue, Mr. Wixon.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And maybe it did.
Mr. Warwick, you were asked some questions by the defense about this meeting that you had with Chad whenever it occurred that weekend. Do you recall those questions?
Yes,
And in fact, part of those conversations involved his relationship with Tammy, his wife.
yes,
Do you recall whether or not Mr. Daybell ever indicated to you the status of Tammy's health?
yes.
What did he say?
He said that she was healthy.
And was that in relationship to the, let me withdraw that. Give us the context of how he explained to you that she was healthy, please.
I was asking him about his marriage, about what kind of wife and mother, and then he told me that she was going to be passing because was given a dream or a vision that she was going to be passing. And then I asked him about her health, and he said she was healthy.
Thank you. The last couple of questions, Mr. Warwick, without intending to be facetious. Have any of your own personal visions or spiritual experiences ever led you to think that you personally have any kind of superpowers?
No,
Have they in any way caused you to feel like you have some prominent position in whatever you believe the last days events are?
no,
Have any of your visions or personal experiences ever revealed to you propriety or a way of dealing with people that you believe are possessed?
no.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wixon.
Judge, I think there's now some recross.
Briefly, Mr. Pryor.
Isn't it odd? Wouldn't it be extremely odd the first time you talk to somebody about their wife, they say, "Oh, and she's going to die soon." Tell me about your wife. And she's very, very, she's a wonderful woman. We've been married for 28 years and she's going to die.
So this discussion about Tammy's health, that's the same discussion that took place supposedly on the Saturday between times you were at the seminar for the Firm Foundation, right?
That'd be the best of my recollection, yes.
And Chad mentioned to you during that so-called Saturday visit that Tammy would be passing sometime in the future, right?
Yes,
And you were aware that Chad had made that revelation well before he ever met Lori Vallow, right?
I heard that he had, but I'd never heard it before.
And what I'm having some difficulty with is that he's telling you that his wife is going to be passing sometime in the future, and yet he also tells you contradictory information suggesting that she's just healthy as can be, right?
I don't know if it's contradictory, but
Okay.
saying yes.
Okay. Now, the prosecutor asked you, you've never been charged with a criminal charge, is that right?
Yes,
Yeah. But the day and the evening or the morning that JJ Vallow was murdered, you and your wife were at Lori Vallow's condominium that night, right?
Yes.
Nothing else, Judge.
All right. That'll conclude testimony then of Mr. Warwick. Is the state intending any recall of the witness?
At this time, we would release Mr. Warwick from the state's perspective.
Mr. Pryor, would the defense have any intention to recall this witness?
Judge, he's under subpoena, and depending on what testimony comes forward in the future, we'll have to make that decision. So we'd like him to remain under subpoena at this point.
All right. Mr. Warwick, then you're still subject to the court's exclusionary order. In this case, you may be recalled since you're under subpoena from the defense, so you're not permitted to watch any trial testimony or discuss your testimony with anyone else until that time. All right?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. You can go ahead and step down, and then we'll have another witness called once the state's ready.
That was an odd succession of questions. You've never been convicted of a crime, right, Mr. Warwick? Correct. And you were there the night that JJ Vallow was murdered, correct? Correct. So
State's next witness, please.
State would call Brandon Boudreaux.
Brandon Boudreaux. Okay, you guys, brace yourselves. This might be a little bit emotional, not sure. Brandon Boudreaux, there was an assassination attempt on him. He is Lori's niece's ex-husband. Very contentious legal custody battle. He was incredibly nervous and very shaky when he testified at Lori's trial. It broke my heart, in all honesty, to hear how he sounded. Maybe he'll be a little better a year later.
All right, now the witness has been placed
question,
under
Rhodes.
oath. I'm just going to inquire. The court does have an exclusionary order. In fact, Mr. Boudreaux, have you observed any of the trial testimony in this case since it began?
I have not.
All right, have you talked to anybody else about the testimony they've given in trial?
I have not.
All right, Mr. Wood, then you can proceed with your direct examination.
Thank you. And Your Honor, before I do, I apologize. I should have asked for this from the court earlier. If I could be handed State's Exhibit 9.
Okay, we'll get that to you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Can you state your name and spell it for the record?
My name is Brandon Boudreaux. Brandon. Boudreaux is Boudreaux.
Mr. Boudreaux, are you married?
I am.
Are you on a first or second marriage?
I'm in my second marriage.
I want to ask you a few questions about your first marriage. Who were you married to?
Melanie, she was Cope and then became Boudreaux.
And in your marriage with Melanie Boudreaux, did you have any children?
I did. I had 4.
What are their ages?
14, 10, 8, and 7.
And how long were you married to Melanie Boudreaux?
I was married to her for about 10 years.
Right. And you mentioned earlier that her maiden name was Cope.
It was, yes.
And are you aware of her current last name?
Pulowski.
What year did you marry Melanie?
2008.
Age.
And during that time, did you have occasion to meet her family?
Yes, I did.
I want to specifically ask about, did you meet the Cox family?
Yes, I did.
And who were they in relation to Melanie Boudreaux?
They would have been her birth mom's family, extended family.
And who in that family did you meet?
I met Janice and Barry Cox, Adam Cox, Summer Shiflett, Lori Vallow, and Alex Cox.
And so what was Lori Vallow's relation to Melanie Boudreaux?
She would have been Melanie's aunt.
And what was Alex Cox's relationship to her?
He would have been her uncle.
So they were your aunt and uncle-in-law.
He has a very good
Did you
radio.
spend much time with Melanie's family?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time together.
In what capacity would you spend time with them?
We spent holidays together. When they lived close to us, we probably see each other once a month. When they were more distant, we would travel to each other's houses and stay for a week or two at a time. And then we do trips together. We went to Disneyland a lot together.
And I asked that kind of broadly about her family. Did you have occasion to spend much time with Lori Vallow and Charles Vallow?
That Lori and her kids and my kids, we would go to Disneyland a lot. We would hang out a lot. We did a lot of things together. It was just kind of part of our lives.
Okay. And I said Charles Vallow at that time. Was Lori Vallow married to Charles Vallow?
Yes.
And how well did you get to know Lori and Charles?
I would say pretty well, very well.
And you mentioned your families spent time together. You said you went to Disneyland?
Yeah.
And would you spend holidays together?
Yeah, often.
Would your children spend time with her children?
Yeah, my son Braxton was very good friends with JJ. They kind of bonded, and my daughter as well. Right.
And how old was Braxton as compared to JJ?
He's a couple years older.
And were you aware that JJ had some special needs?
Yeah. JJ had autism. Everybody who was around him, it was easy to tell. Early on, when he was younger, he was nonverbal for a while, and so he had like all this energy, but he didn't know how to use it. So you just had to be prepared for that. You set your house up for it when he'd come over to our house, or when you went to Lori and Charles. They spent a lot of time making sure that it was a safe place for him, and that everything was kind of handled for that. And then as he got older, he started learning how to talk, and he could say things. And similarly, he would rephrase things over and over. When he wanted to play with my son, he'd always say, go to Braxy, and he called my daughter Fridays instead of Bridie. So Braxy and Fridays, Braxy and Fridays. But
That's adorable.
and so
Braxton
you said
Fridays.
Braxton was a good playmate for JJ.
Yeah.
Did your family spend time with Tylee Ryan?
Yeah.
Tell me about your relationship with Tylee Ryan.
She's a good girl. She was, I knew her from when she was little, and then all the way up into being a teenager. And so she was a normal teenager. She had her moments where she just wanted to sleep in late and no one to bug her, watch too much Netflix, and other times where she'd open up and she was sweet, and you got to know the real Tylee. So you got a little bit of both.
And did she interact with your children as well?
She did, yeah. Often would babysit them, or she was a little older than my kids, so she would naturally be kind of more of a, she had good motherly instincts, with them.
Did you ever observe Tylee with JJ?
Yeah, she was very protective of him.
And did you know Colby Ryan?
Yeah, I do.
Speaking of Tylee, did you yourself have any special sort of religious connection to Tylee Ryan?
I did. I baptized her.
Okay.
Oh,
And when you
know
baptized her,
that
what
part.
church was that in?
In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And so to your knowledge, Tylee and her family were members of that church.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about Melanie Boudreaux and Lori Vallow. Did you have occasion to observe their relationship?
Yes, I did.
Hi,
And was that over
definition.
a span of years?
Yes.
What was that relationship like?
Um, Melanie's mom died when she was young, and she had an awesome stepmom, but I think she also looked a lot to Lori as a mother figure. So she, in our marriage, at least, she was very easily influenced by wanting to do things. That's why we went always to Disneyland with Lori. It was just kind of, she always wanted to be like Lori and spent a lot of time looking for her acceptance.
And you testified that you indeed spent a lot of time with them.
Yes.
Did you know Charles Vallow?
Yes.
Did you have a relationship with Charles Vallow?
Yeah, we had a really good relationship.
Tell us about that. What made that a good relationship?
Um, we just had similar personalities. I think both of us, we loved what we did for work. We loved owning businesses and selling. And he was very much a producer mentality type of a person. And besides that, I think we both loved our faith and had a lot of gratitude that we had. I think of us spending time just talking about how grateful we were to have our families and be in a position where we were in life.
And you said you had some common ground in business. What did you do? at work?
I worked I built a direct TV sales organization, and he he did life insurance.
Oh, me and Brendan have something in common.
You
I
mentioned traveling
DirecTV.
to each other's homes. Where did that happen?
It depended throughout, that 10 years is a long time. And so they moved, they never owned their houses. They rented, and they moved a little bit more often. And so they lived in Hawaii for parts of the time, and we would travel out to Hawaii to see them. Other times they lived blocks from us in Arizona. I lived in Arizona throughout that whole time.
And would they sometimes stay at your house when they came back from Hawaii?
Yes. Yeah. When I was first married, Lori actually came up and stayed with us in Utah as well when I had a place there.
And I believe you mentioned that you would spend holidays together sometimes.
Yeah. Often like Christmas, Thanksgiving, major holidays, we'd end up meeting at somebody's house and doing it together.
Do you recall the last Christmas that your family, the Boudreaux family, and the Charles and Lori Vallow family spent together?
Yeah, it would have been 2018.
And was that a typical Christmas?
No, it was different.
Why was it different?
Um, in 2018, our families were changing. That particular Christmas, I wasn't as aware of everything that was going on. But when we went there, when you spend that much time together all the time, you don't have to say anything. You just know from each other's body language. And when you show up places, when you do things, it's just, you always feel welcome. You feel loved. You feel close. It's like you can pick up right where you left off. And that Christmas, when I was over at Lori's house, there just felt like a lot of distance. There was, and usually just the family. It was just like the Coxes and the Boudreaux. And that Christmas, there was someone named Melanie Gibb who was there. Who, she was a stranger to me, so it was kind of different to have a stranger at Christmas. And there was really not very much conversation with me, and a lot less focus on my kids and the kids that Christmas.
So when you say less focus from who?
From Lori.
And how was her interaction with you and your family different than before?
Yeah. Lori was pretty like doting. When my kids would come over, she would make them feel loved. She would, just try to spoil them with presents and attention. And that was kind of her way of letting people know that she noticed them. And that didn't happen that Christmas.
So it was markedly different.
Yeah.
Did you observe Lori and your wife, Melanie, at that party?
Yes.
Do you recall what their interaction was?
Um, I I remember leaving afterwards and talking to my wife about how it felt different because it felt so different, and her telling me that nothing felt different at all. Um, so I would say that she felt like it was fine and normal, and it didn't seem to her like it did to me.
Okay. Around this time, were you and your wife active in your church?
Yes.
And when I say active in your church, did you regularly attend church meetings?
Yeah. Usually every Sunday, unless there's something going on.
And had your family and the Charles and Lori Vallow family, had you ever shared religious activities with them?
Yeah. Like I said, I baptized Tylee. We talked about church openly amongst us.
Around that time, so we're talking about the end of 2018, did your wife's activity in religious events change?
Um, yeah. In the fall of 2018, earlier in my marriage, uh, she just didn't love going to church. It wasn't her thing. I liked going to church, so I was kind of the advocate. I would push a little more. But in the fall of 2018, she got very excited about religion and going to church, and she started talking about how she set this goal that she was going to go to the temple every single day.
Okay. And so around the fall of 2018, her attitudes appeared to change.
Yes.
It's like swinging to
Uh,
extremes.
And you said she wanted to go to the temple every day. What did you think of that?
Um, in our faith, it's going to the temple is definitely something that's important to us. It's a way to kind of to go through a process to remind yourself of promises that you make to God. It's kind of ritualistic, but for me, it's a great thing to do in moderation. I might go once a month, and I think that's kind of a normal thing for a person. If they set a goal, they go once a month and just kind of remember, hey, I committed to God to give my life to certain principles. But when it's pretty rare for someone to go every day, that's a lot, especially for a mom with kids at home and a lot of other things that we had as responsibilities. And so it was surprising, I think would probably be the right word. But also for me at the time, I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to show that, I could meet her where she was and help her try to figure things out.
And just for clarity's purpose, in your faith, is going to the temple the same thing as going to church? What most people think of as going to church?
No.
What's the difference?
Going to the temple is something we do once for ourselves. That very first time to make promises to God. It's like being baptized. We go once for ourselves. We make promises to God. And then each time you go afterwards, you do it for someone who's passed on, but it's something that's kind of viewed, like I said, it's maybe a once a month thing, or going regularly is healthy, and I think a good part of anybody who wants to find a rhythm for their religion. But going every day would maybe be something somebody did if they were retired and they just had nothing else to do.
But going to the temple is not your regular Sunday services.
No, we go to a regular Sunday service every Sunday at a church building.
Thank you to clarify that.
Their temple is really a
And so this was,
place.
I think you said in the fall of 2018 that these changes started taking place.
Yes.
In addition to this daily temple attendance, what else changed in your wife's religious demeanor or attitude?
At that time she started going to these things that she was calling firesides, but weren't things that I would call a fireside.
Okay, so let's clarify that. In your church, if someone says fireside, what do you normally think of?
So inside of our faith, there's a leader of like a group of we call it a ward. So like a group of people who live in a certain geographic area. And so inside your ward, that leader's name is a bishop, and him or one of the other people, like the counselors in the leadership group, at times they might, besides going to church on Sunday, they might set up a meeting that they think might lift us up or encourage us spiritually. And it might be outside the normal times you go. And so they usually do them in the evenings, and they call them firesides. That's something that, you get together, it's under the direction of the church. And ideally it's uplifting. It's something that's going to bring you closer to, your commitments you made when you're baptized to try to follow the Savior.
Okay, and you said that Melanie Boudreaux, and there's multiple Melanies in this case, so I'm going to keep referring to her as Melanie Boudreaux, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
And so Melanie Boudreaux, she started going to what I believe you testified, what she called firesides, correct?
Correct.
And were these different than what you would normally call a fireside?
Yeah, so I kind of just described what I think of as a fireside, but she was just going to people's houses, and they were doing meetings that weren't under direction of anybody from the church. And oftentimes they were focused on things that aren't things we talk about normally in church. Some of them were just,
What kind of things?
I didn't go to them, so I can't say what exactly was talked about, but I can share what came back from them, which was what made me concerned. She came home one time and wanted to get like $10,000 worth of food storage all at once because she was really concerned about the end of times coming, the end of the world coming. And
The fear
it just didn't
mongering
seem
is
very practical
intense.
to me, and then there was other focuses that she would come home with. She had a fascination with like Jesus Christ, and did he have a family, and why was James named the beloved? A lot of early Christian, early church things. And so I would share perspective, but I was also I kind of tried to share with her my perspective on. I served a mission for my church for a couple years, and I saw some people who fell away from it, and I shared something that I had noticed in that process that those people got really focused on not the core of believing in finding faith in Jesus Christ, but they got focused on things that were really far away from that, and it led to them falling away from the core of their faith.
Hey, Chopper.
And you said that you never attended any of these, can I use the phrase alternative firesides?
Yeah, that's fun. No, I did not attend any of them.
Did you ever attempt to?
I did ask if I could, mostly because I wanted to see what was going on in there so I could give her better perspective, but she let me know I wasn't welcome at them.
Hello, Tracy.
So she didn't let you go with her.
Yeah, she told me I wasn't welcome to come.
Do you know if Lori Vallow was at any of those firesides?
Yeah, I do. She's the one who invited her to them
So he
initially.
was explicitly not welcome. Red flag, red flag. If any of these things happen in your world, pay attention.
Coming back to winter of 2018, if it's fair to say that your testimony, your wife's religious fervor has changed. And you had this awkward Christmas party. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Did the situation, and you've testified that your relationship between the Chad and Lori family and your family was close. Did the situation between your family and Charles and Lori's family change around that time?
A little bit after, right after in the new year, beginning of the new year, there was a period where Lori, she did send a message to the family telling them that her accusation was Charles was cheating on her, and that because of this, she locked. She took all the money out of their bank account. She stole Charles's truck, changed the locks on their house. It was very irrational to me.
And when was this?
It would have been like the end of January of 2019.
Yep.
And how did you respond to that situation?
Initially I didn't even know about it. I think she called everybody, but my phone was blocked from Charles, so I couldn't hear from him at all. I found out later that Melanie must have blocked him in my phone, but
Just to be clear, Charles Vallow's contact was blocked on your phone.
yes, and I didn't do it. And the only other person who had access was my wife.
Okay. And so you were talking about how you reacted to this situation of, I guess you could say, a breakup between Lori and Charles.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one when you're that close with people. And and everybody in the family kind of got drug in and involved in it because it was messy. As far as like Charles really didn't want it to happen. He wasn't looking for it. He was trying to make sure it didn't happen. He was sending us as a group regular emails to try to contact us and work through it and try to communicate, because Lori just kind of cut him off after all that. She just stopped talking to him. She actually left him with JJ and just disappeared for a while.
Do you know where she went?
I don't
But she didn't take JJ with her.
know.
Do you know how old JJ was at the time?
I can't remember right now. It's been a long time.
But he was still a young child.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't leave JJ. JJ had to be watched all the time. You couldn't leave him alone. He was, when you're watching JJ, it's your whole life. Like, you have to plan everything around it. I mean, just for him to come visit, you have to plan everything around it.
And you stated that the whole family got drug in. Did your wife take a position on taking a side?
Yeah, when it happened, I wanted us to not take a side, and divorces are just messy, like there's nothing anybody can do about, like, when you've been together for a long time and you're trying to separate both emotionally, gonna have a hard time going through the process. And so my encouragement was that we didn't pick a side, and we just loved them both, and then made sure that the kids knew that they had somewhere where they could be safe, and our house could be that. But Melanie just kept saying how she was uncomfortable with Charles, and she didn't.
Microphone, please.
We're getting into some hearsay, and Judge, I've been patient, but the narrative is getting a little lengthy now, so I'm going to object on narrative and hearsay at this point.
Sustained.
Okay. Did Melanie Boudreaux demand that your family take a side?
Objection, hearsay.
That's a request, Your Honor. A request is not hearsay.
That is overruled. You can answer.
Yes, she did.
And
Hey, Sharon.
did you respect Melanie's
just
wishes
saying.
on that?
I did my best.
And was that because she was your wife?
Yeah, I wanted to stay married. It was really important to me.
And so we've kind of moved on now to the beginning of 2019. Is that accurate? to say in
Yes.
these events that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Did you see Lori Vallow much in early of 2019?
Not at all.
And I believe, I don't want to misstate what you said. It was your understanding that she had left.
Yeah. I don't know where, because I didn't have any contact and it didn't seem like anyone else did, but
Did you see Charles Vallow at all during that time?
I did a few times. We would agree for JJ to come over, play with my kids. And so he would come over.
Okay. And Lori was never with him.
Never.
And was she with JJ?
No.
But Charles would come over and bring JJ to the house.
Yeah.
And what would JJ do at your house?
He would just come play with my son. He would, they play video games as long as he could keep his attention on it. Sometimes he just bounce from one thing to another and be all over the house. Braxton would kind of keep his eye on him and play with him. He knew JJ was special, and so he kind of kept that assignment. Before JJ came over, we put like little stoppers on the top of all the doors out or whatever to make sure he would try to sneak outside. And then it was, he's so fast that you had to be prepared. So you'd pre-plan some of that stuff before he came over, make sure it was ready for him. And then, but Braxton would kind of keep his eye on him, and I would usually at that time, I'd sit and talk to Charles.
Okay. What would you speak with Charles about?
You can imagine someone going through a divorce they didn't want to go through. He was pretty, I don't know what the right words are, distraught, sad, overwhelmed. It was a lot for him.
And he was confused too.
Are you aware if at any time there was an attempt at reconciliation between Charles and Lori?
Yeah, I think Charles tried to reconcile. I actually think he stopped at the divorce. He always said that he was going to make it work.
Sustain.
Right. I'm going to move forward to the summer of 2019. Did you have an occasion to take a trip to your in-laws' house?
I did, yeah.
And do you recall when that was?
It would have been in June of 2018.
Do you recall the exact date or approximately when in June?
The week of June, like 23rd, 25th, something like that.
What was your purpose for going to your in-laws?
My wife's younger sister was getting married.
And while you were there, did anything out of the ordinary happen?
Yes,
What was that?
a few things, but the first thing that happened is my grandfather died of a heart attack.
Okay. And were you expecting that?
Oh, how awful.
No,
No.
And so you're at your wife's family's house when you got the news?
I was actually with my parents. We took my family, went to, decided to go to church with my mom and my dad, which is they still live in the same place where I had left for my mission on. And we were actually just sitting in the pews right before church started, and my dad got a phone call, and he never gets up and takes his phone calls in church. So he got up and he left. And he came back and he waved us all out. Said,
Your Honor, I apologize.
Go ahead. It's sustain, as you're saying.
It's just some foundation, so I can move on at this point.
Very well.
Did you have any conversations about your grandfather's death with your wife, Melanie?
yes, after he passed away, I waited a day or two. My mom called me to tell me when the funeral was. And I told her that when it was and that I wanted us all to go. And she told me she wasn't going to go.
Sustained, and I'll strike that final part of the response, what was said.
All right. At this point, were you still at your in-laws' home?
Yes.
And did you have a disagreement with your wife over whether or not to attend your grandfather's funeral?
Yes.
Did you want to go to your father's funeral, your grandfather's funeral?
Overruled. You can continue, Mr. Wood.
Yes, I wanted to go to my grandfather's funeral and I wanted my family to.
While you were having this discussion with your wife, did that escalate into any other type of conversation?
Yes. It escalated into a conversation and an argument that didn't make any sense to me.
What was it about?
Well, she started bringing Lori into this argument, which had nothing to do with what we were talking about. She said that God had told-
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. It's hearsay.
You're right.
Response, Mr. Wood.
Your Honor, I believe it comes in for the effect on the listener, not for the truth of the matter.
Well, I think just the specific statements are hearsay beyond that, so I'll sustain the objection.
Without saying what the words your wife used, what was the context of that conversation?
We had an argument about whether or not I hacked Lori Vallow's computer.
Did your wife accuse you of hacking Lori Vallow's computer?
Yes.
Did she request that you admit that you hacked into her computer?
Yes. She said that I had to.
Judge, I'm going to object again.
Your Honor,
Sustain.
Your Honor, if I might briefly argue, a request is not hearsay.
Well, a request, if it's calling for specific statements of the party not here for cross, would be hearsay. So I'm not saying you can't answer, but in terms of specifically what was said, that's where the ruling stands.
All right. Thank you. So that accusation was made.
Yes.
What was your reaction to that?
I just felt really frustrated. I had no idea why we were even talking about it. It had nothing to do with what I was trying to get through to her and what I was trying to talk about. It was like this thing that didn't make any sense to me.
Without going into any specific statements, did Melanie Boudreaux provide any context for why she thought you'd hacked into Lori Vallow's computer?
Judge, it's going to call for hearsay.
Overruled.
Can you ask that question one more time?
Without providing any of the statements she said, did Melanie Boudreaux provide any context for why she thought or why she was accusing you of hacking into Lori Vallow's computer?
Can you ask that one more time? I want to answer it properly.
Sorry, it's probably complicated.
Yeah.
Was there any reason given why she thought you had hacked into Lori Vallow's computer?
Judge, response calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
No.
Just a bare accusation.
Yeah.
To be clear, Mr. Boudreaux, did you ever hack into Lori Vallow's computer?
No.
Did, in this conversation, did Melanie Boudreaux inform you of anything that God had revealed to her
Judge,
in relation to this divorce?
Judge, I'm going to object. This is leading.
On leading, that's overruled.
Yeah, the argument continued to progress, and I guess she actually specifically said that God had told her.
Judge, I'm going to object. It's hearsay.
It is hearsay.
Your Honor, that this statement is not coming in for the truth of the matter. It's just simply to show the argument and the effect on the listener.
All right, and again, for that purpose, it's not hearsay, but any specific statements where they're not subject to cross, I'm finding are hearsay.
Yeah. Without saying the specific statement she said, what did she accuse you of?
Uh, of of being gay and of hacking her Aunt Lori's computer.
And what was your response to those accusations?
I mean, all of the emotions you would think you'd feel after 10 years married to somebody. Disappointment, frustration, a lot of grief, a lot of grief.
Did you have any idea that she would make an accusation of homosexuality against you?
No. I mean, I had a thought that it might happen because of something Charles had said, but no, I never would have believed it.
So you have, is it fair to call it an argument?
Yeah.
How did it end?
I mean, it took a long time. It started in the afternoon. It went past midnight, and she went to bed. I just stayed up troubled all night.
Did you send a text to Charles and Lori that night?
I did. I was really frustrated about this whole thing being involved in my relationship with my wife. So I sent it.
It's becoming a narrative. It's non-responsive.
Overruled.
So I sent a text to Charles and Lori both, telling them that if my family was broken up and my marriage ruined, it was on them.
Did you ever hear from Lori in response to that?
No.
Did you hear from Charles in response to that?
I did.
When approximately was that?
Um, a little bit later, a lot was going on at that time, so I couldn't say like a specific time, but I ended up talking to him on the phone.
Would you say this? Is it fair to say we're still in the late June?
Yeah, it was like the next day, probably at like in the evening.
And what was that conversation like?
He just apologized for
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. It's calling for hearsay.
Sustained.
What did you say to Charles?
I just apologized to him. Told him I was really sorry about not being there more for him, because now I was feeling like I know he must have felt. And he just, he was really gracious.
Was that the last time you spoke with Charles Vallow?
It was.
After Charles Vallow died, did you have any contact with Lori Vallow?
No, I did not.
After Charles died, did you have any contact with JJ Vallow?
No, I did not.
And after Charles died, did you have any contact with Tylee Ryan?
No, I did not.
After Charles Vallow died, what happened with your relationship with your wife?
Oh, we got divorced.
When did that happen, approximately?
We started the divorce right after my grandfather's funeral, but it takes a little while. So we got a mediator right after and signed all the documents. and I moved her into a rental house, and then I think it finalized in October.
In that process, was there any, the home that you and Melanie lived in, did you sell it?
I did.
And did she move to another location?
She did. I helped her get a rental home.
And did you move to another location?
I did. I ended up getting a rental home as well.
Approximately when did you get that rental home?
I got it. I found out the house was sold like the end of September. It looked like it was going to sell, and so I went and found a rental home at that time.
Right. And where was, uh, don't go into specifics of neighborhoods, but what city was this in?
Gilbert,
Gilbert.
Arizona.
And is that where you had been living the last several years?
Yeah, I moved back.
And so did you, you located a property that, was it close to the home that you and Melanie had been living in?
Yes.
And why was that?
I wanted to make sure my kids had stability. I was really worried about all of the changes.
And were you sharing custody with Melanie at this time?
I was.
What was the situation between you and Melanie like at this point, at the end of September, beginning of October of 2019?
It had changed quite a bit. Since June, she just stopped talking to me. We could text, but barely. There was no connection anymore, and she's very cold to me.
At this point, did you know where Lori Vallow was?
No,
Is it fair to say that probably wasn't the first thing on your mind?
yeah,
But you hadn't heard from her,
no,
and you hadn't heard from Tylee or JJ?
no.
So we've been speaking about this, your situation with your wife, Melanie Boudreaux, at the end of September, beginning of October. Did anything happen at the beginning of October of 2019 that affected that situation?
Yes,
What was that?
on October 2nd of 2019, someone parked in front of my house and shot at me and tried to kill me.
Okay, let's talk about that. October 2nd, you said?
Yes.
Let's go to the kind of the beginning of the day. How did your day start?
I woke up, I had all my kids at my house, so I got them ready for school, and then I got them out the door. We did our normal stuff, breakfast, prayer, and then I dropped the older two at school, and the younger one, the second youngest, at a preschool, and then I dropped my youngest at Melanie's house.
After you dropped your kids off, where did you go next?
Then I went to the gym.
This is all in that same area, Gilbert, Arizona.
Yes.
And after the gym, where did you go?
Then I drove back to my house, and as I was driving around, my house is a couple of houses in on the street, so I made a left in onto the street. And as I was driving, I noticed a few things. My house, the driveway, there was like a Jeep parked right on the edge of it, where I would normally turn in, and there was nothing parked there usually. I'd only been there for a few days, but so far it was always, there's this van there, and like the Jeep was parked with its like bumper basically on the van. And it just looked at that place. It had a Texas license plate. There was no tire on the back of the Jeep. And you know how when you open and close a Jeep, there's like little tabs on the window. those were sitting on the outside of it. So it just looked awkward, just was awkward enough that I noticed it right as I turned around the corner.
Okay. So you noticed the Jeep.
Mhm.
Did you notice anybody inside of it?
I couldn't tell if there was anybody inside of it. This all happened in such, imagine coming around a corner, driving a couple house lengths. So it all happened very quickly. And then the window opened up and I saw a gun and a silencer. And I would my window shattered. I heard a bang, all kind of in the same amount of time. And my immediate thought was just, I'm getting shot at. And instead of turning my wheel and into my driveway, I just pushed the gas and drove straight forward.
What happened after that?
I drove to where my street ended, and there was a turn, and kind of as I came up to that part, I remember grabbing my phone, calling 911. Talking to the operator, I went and pulled a little bit around, and there was like a little community pool there, and I kind of parked in front of it for a second. And there's like a loop between my street and the street above me, and I remember I could see on that loop, I saw that Jeep start to come around the corner, and then it did a U-turn, went the other way, and I think I started to follow it at first, and then I think
Were you on the phone with 911 during this time?
yes, yeah, the whole time I was talking to an operator.
And you just said, if I understand correctly, that you started following the Jeep.
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking at the moment, but
Did you notify 911 that that's what you were doing?
yeah, and I believe they told me to pull around and park in front of my house. So I did, and then they told me to wait for police, and they came shortly thereafter.
Okay. I believe you testified, correct me if I'm wrong, that you had only been in this house for a few days.
Yes.
Um, how many people had you told that you were in this house?
Almost nobody. It would happen very quickly because I wasn't supposed to be able to get my kids as soon as I was, but my wife had agreed to let me have them sooner. And so I had moved everything out of the house that was selling to get them in so I could have them for that weekend with me in my house because I would do anything to keep my kids with me. And
So when Melanie Boudreaux knew you were there, had you told anybody else?
so I had to tell her when I got the place. I hadn't told anybody else, but my neighbors had seen me moving and they helped me move. So they knew where I was, just the ones that lived by me there.
So had you told any other friends and family yet this was your new residence?
Just hadn't had time to tell anybody yet. It was so quick, and then I had my kids.
So did law enforcement show up?
Yes.
And did you notify them of what had happened?
Yeah, I told them everything that I could.
And when you said your window had shattered, is that your driver's side front window?
Yes, the bullet had lodged up in like the door frame, which I didn't know in the moment, but later you could see where it had hit, and it was just right above like where my head would be.
And did you describe the Jeep to law enforcement?
Yes,
And did you follow up with law enforcement after that?
yes. When you go through something like that, you spend all day. It feels like with law enforcement, it takes a really long time. So at some point, like a detective came over, I talked to him, and then later, as I was thinking through everything and talking with other people that were close to it, I realized that I felt really confident that the Jeep was Tylee's Jeep.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Were you aware that Tylee Ryan had a Jeep?
Yes,
Did you know how long she'd had it?
Charles got it for her during all of this, when he was in Texas, he'd gotten her Jeep.
So when he was in Texas, was that in 2019?
Yes,
And you had seen that Jeep.
yes,
And so I don't want to put words in your mouth, your testimony is that as you reflected on it, you thought more and more that this was Tylee's Jeep.
Yeah, I think I might have called Zach Cox and talked to him too, and he might have had the same thought, and we both were just like, that's got to be the Jeep.
Who is Zach Cox?
Adam Cox, Lori's brother. It's his son. He had lived with Lori and Charles for a period of time, and with me. He's 18, 19 at the time, so he just kind of out on his own. And he was working for me. I had given him a job.
Did you take any other steps to identify that Jeep?
Yeah, I was an insurance agent at the time, and previously Charles had given us the VIN number, and so I just gave that VIN number to law enforcement.
Hello, She-Wolf.
And okay, so you have the VIN number for Tylee Ryan's Jeep.
Yeah.
And that's the number you provided to law enforcement.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, you had that because you were insuring that Jeep.
I didn't end up insuring it. He had just given us all the information. Charles had.
Okay.
So
Your Honor, I don't know what time the court wants to take the mid-morning break.
This is probably about good time to do it, Mr. Wood.
Okay.
All right, so we will take our mid-morning recess. Remind the jurors, please, not to discuss the case amongst yourselves on the break or with anyone else. We will return to the courtroom here in about 30 minutes, maybe a little less if we can.
All right, please.
Wow. Yeah. So everywhere you turn, when you look at this case, there is more and more and more and more. So what I've been trying to do is, because somebody asked me, does Brandon have custody of the kids? And at one point, I know that Melanie had been arrested and retained she had been arrested and questioned under suspicion for this whole thing about this assassination attempt. And at that time, I know there was a lot of movement around whether she could get custody or not. And also at around that time, she and her husband, her current husband, Ian Pulowski, had been doing interviews on behalf of, like being surrogates, proxies for Lori's. Yes, he did hide the kids for a while. That's right, he did. So I was looking this up and was reminded about this lawsuit that Brandon had to file against Melanie's lawyers, because during the custody battle, they actually put a press release out saying that he victimizes women and he's into dark porn. So actually, let me show this to you, what I'm looking at here. Here it is. So this is the actual lawsuit. And the information in the papers here is rather harrowing. It talks about how there was a shooting. Oh, sorry. I need to share this on the screen. One moment. Yeah, Ian did wear a wire. Ian Pulowski wore a wire. They were fairly high profile in this case at the beginning, and then all of a sudden they went out of sight. And I think it might have had to do with all this fighting about the custody. So there was some stuff I was just reading here. My dog is being very, very needy right now, so I'm sorry if I sound a little bit distracted. But here. I'm looking for the part that I just read that is like, I feel so bad for this guy. He went through a lot of crap. Sorry, hold on. So Pulowski is the niece of Lori Vallow. So Pulowski is, in these papers, is Melanie Boudreaux, his ex-wife. Vallow has recently received significant news covers because her two minor children have been missing since September 2019. Upon information and belief, Vallow and Pulowski are members of a radical religious cult. On or about October 2nd, 2019, an unknown person shot at Mr. Boudreaux. The shooter missed Brandon by inches and hit his vehicle. The vehicle driven by the shooter was registered to Vallow's deceased ex-husband. Upon information and belief, the shooter intended to kill Mr. Boudreaux, so his life insurance proceeds would go to Pulowski in order to fund the religious group. Soon after the shooting, soon after the shooting, Pulowski abruptly moved and concealed her whereabouts. So she just escaped. She just went, she just literally left. Upon information and belief, Pulowski moved to Idaho to be near Vallow. Pulowski provided notice of her move to Brandon via text message. Based on the attempt on his life, Pulowski's disappearance, and concerns regarding Pulowski's mental health, Brandon filed for an emergency motion for temporary orders regarding legal decision-making and parenting. The court granted the emergency motion and noted Pulowski, who had been properly served, failed to appear at the hearing considering the emergency motion. Pulowski later returned to town and instituted a custody battle that continues today. Brandon and Pulowski are involved in a highly contentious custody battle. As part of the custody litigation, Brandon asserted that he believed that Pulowski knew the whereabouts of Vallow's missing children. In that same pleading, Brandon classified Pulowski's knowledge of the whereabouts of her aunt's two missing children and her unwillingness to cooperate with law enforcement as daunting. Brandon believed that every statement he made was truthful and made in good faith to protect his children. Pulowski has claimed in the custody litigation that Brandon's statements were false, but no court has made any determination. Upon information and belief, Pulowski retained defendants to represent her relation to a criminal investigation regarding, in part, the whereabouts of Vallow's children. On or about February 26, 2020, defendants issued a press release entitled Pulowski Speaks Out, the first press release. And then the first press release goes on to state Pulowski strenuously denies the innuendos and allegations that she knows the whereabouts of the missing Vallow kids and that she has been involved in any wrongdoing. The first press release directly quotes Jarvis as saying, Ms. Pulowski has cooperated with law enforcement, including meeting for hours with the FBI on 3 separate days. As she told the FBI, Pulowski does not know the whereabouts of the missing children or her aunt, Lori Vallow. In addition to these statements, the first press release makes several shocking statements about Brandon. Specifically, Brandon Boudreaux has a history of victimizing women, which is probably an extension of his use of extreme and dark porn. Can you imagine that being written in a press release? Attorney Garrett Smith added, Mr. Smith continued, Pulowski confronted Brandon Boudreaux in June of last year with proof of his porn addiction and homosexual affairs. Brandon Boudreaux retaliated with threats to attack her and to take her kids away. He has carried through with his threats by lying in his court documents. Sadly and irresponsibly, much of the media has quoted Brendan Boudreaux's biased, vindictive, and fake accusations as truth and fact when they are his resentful, vengeful, and dishonest efforts to get full custody of Pulaski's children. Brendan Boudreaux deceptively took Pulaski's children out of the state and kept them unlawfully. Pulaski was the stable parent in her children's lives while Brendan Boudreaux traveled for weeks and was rarely home. Wow. Wow. That was really freaking low. So for that press release and the ways that they went about going about that custody battle, he won that suit. He won that suit for $12 million. So the papers I was just reading were from a lawsuit that Brendan Boudreaux filed against Melanie Boudreaux's lawyers because of the things they said during their custody battle. And I found that, and the lawyers had to settle for $12 million. So do you see the lengths that these people will go to, even hiring lawyers that are willing to put out a press release that accuses a man of being, takes us once again back to 19th century sexual values and decides to out, somebody, whether they're homosexual or not, says that they're into dark prawn, makes all kinds of accusations. That is the essence of Darvo. Melanie Boudreaux, Pulaski, whatever, Cope, victimized him and then turned around and claimed victimhood. So I know that my understanding is that maybe they were finally able to come to an agreement, and they may address that while Brendan is on the stand. They may address, hey, and what happened with your marriage, and do you have custody of that thing? So we might get those answers, and because I think, in these situations, even when there's really contentious divorce and custody proceedings happening, eventually parents who want to put their kids first and want for the family to not be disrupted constantly by infighting, they can come together and come to an agreement and put all that stuff behind them. And I have a slight feeling that maybe they've done that in this case and that they do share custody, but I don't know for sure. I really don't know for sure. So in case you don't know what Brandon looks like a little bit closer up, he's actually, yeah, I think they might share. I'm sorry. Every time my dog is very needy right now. So every time I move, my dog puts his nose where my hands are. And it makes it a little bit difficult to operate. Hold on a moment. Ever have that? Every time you try to move your hand anywhere, your dog wants his nose to be in your hand. Anyway, so it was really hard to see him on the stand. So here's some pictures of him. he's a really good looking guy. And he also has he's a successful guy. I noticed that we have some things in common. There's him and Melanie together. There they are running. There they are with their family. I mean, you just look at that and you think the story that he tells is so harrowing, because you look at this beautiful family here, right? Beautiful family. Seem happy, of course. It's just a picture, but everything was relatively normal until Lori became radicalized, right? And influenced her niece. And then everything started to get crazy. And people are getting gaslit all the time. People are noticing the change and saying, hey, I think it seems like things are different now. Don't they seem different to you? And the person who's actually acting different is like, no, I see no difference. But they aren't acknowledging that they are getting more and more and more sucked in to this, and slowly being drawn into this way of thinking that by the time you get to the other extreme, it's so radical and so off, but they're so insulated with each other. They hang out with each other so much that they just keep reinforcing each other's ideas. But Brandon was kept out of it, and he was either kept out because Melanie didn't want him to be brought into it, or he wasn't interested. But either way, he's left out. So she's going through this radical change. He's noticing it, saying that's happening. And she's going, no, everything's fine here. And then all of a sudden she wants to buy $10,000 worth of food prep. And then she's, acting in all these weird ways. Hey, catch me if you can. So every time I hear Brendan Boudreaux's name or him talk, and then he talks about the sequence of events of his life are devastating, because he's there. His grandfather drops dead when they're about to attend a wedding. Oh my gosh, what was that? Did you hear that? Something just came across my speaker that I don't know what it was. So the other thing I found that I thought was interesting is that after Lori's trial, he issued a statement after the guilty verdict. And this statement itself is really a reflection on the type of person that he is. And it shows you, how deep his faith is and how much he's been affected by this. It says, and this is from Brandon, and after the verdict with Lori Vallow, we are very grateful to all who've been involved in this and corresponding cases over the past several years, and who will continue to be involved until all those responsible have been given their chance in our judicial process. We want to express gratitude for the effort and time spent by so many to bring forward the truth. Our judicial process can't bring back loved ones, nor can it heal those left behind missing them. We will choose to lean on our faith for healing and express gratitude for the jury of our peers who had to face those horrible things to help bring out resolution. We recognize that people are not inherently good or evil. It's what makes these tragic events so much harder for those of us who are affected by these crimes. While we do not glory in any conviction, we recognize the importance of holding accountable those who would commit such terrible atrocities. Tylee and JG Tylee and JJ will forever be missed. They are precious and unique and will always be loved. We mourn the loss of them. We also mourn Charles. As many have seen, he was truly a good man. He loved his family and showed his love by providing so much for so many who knew him. He was always quick to make all feel welcome, and he never let anyone go without. He was quick to spoil his family. He is missed every day. We wish all of you could have known the good times our family shared. Disney, beaches, football games, and holidays are treasured memories. As we have watched silently while complete strangers rally for justice, we thank you for standing for truth. Sorry, y'all. I mean, I'm trying to read this without messing it up with my tearies. Just him saying, we wish you could have known all the good times. I could picture that family being really happy, a really happy, normal family, right? And then somebody has to go and majorly fuck it all up. Right? And it's just devastating to see how quickly that can all happen. And like 1 minute you think you're in a happy marriage and you're gonna, you're just gonna kind of go off into the wild blue yonder. The next minute, your wife is radicalized and you're being shot at. Your dad, and while all the normal course of life events happen, like family members dying, your grandfather, people getting married, you've got these insane people who should be in an insane asylum plotting murders. And ending up in these, there's multiple court battles that came out of this. So obviously, Melanie and Brandon went through a nasty custody thing, and then they went through such a nasty custody thing that Brandon had to sue her lawyers. That is true, Rhodes. That is true. She did. I mean, she went through a whirlwind, and I mean, she went through like people's lives like a Tasmanian devil, right? And it is very easy for me to believe. It wouldn't be hard to convince me that she had something to do with Joseph Ryan's death too, because it's so out of the blue, But anyway, I haven't finished reading this yet. It broke me down, you guys, because it just, you can just see that this guy, he was going along in life being a good guy, and then all this shit just comes piling down upon one by one by one. And he's not the only guy in this family that's been affected like this. Many of them have. Because of one woman's sick need and her, now husband's sick need to be together, and to use a fucking cult belief to justify murder. Yep. And you notice, yes, truth matters, welcome. And you notice that whenever the people on the stand who are members of the family, they're asked about JJ and they're about to talk about JJ or Tylee, they have to pause for a bit and gather themselves. It's still so fresh and immediate to them. And when they think of, you want to think about your loved ones, I'm sure he wants to think about Tylee and JJ like this, right? Or Tylee like this. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful pictures I've seen of Tylee right there. He wants to remember them like this, right? Those are his cousins or, in-laws. But then now, whenever he thinks of them, he has to think of them the state they were found in, and he has to force his mind. He has to come up with coping techniques so that his mind doesn't go to the absolute worst of the worst picture in his mind of his family member that he's left with. So I just have an immense amount of sympathy for him. Let me keep reading this. We mourn with the Daybell and Douglas families. We never met Tammy, but she and you have been in our most sincere prayers. We can't imagine the pain of your loss and hope that this process might help with healing and closure. Lastly, many people have been involved in these events, some by choice and others perhaps not. Regardless of how they are involved, we encourage all to consider that this world is already so full of divisiveness. We advocate for forgiveness and privacy where possible. We live by the hope that the worst part of our lives does not become who we are. We do not condone or encourage less prosecution for those accountable, but instead encourage true change and accountability for those involved. We hope for sincere forgiveness for those affected, that they might not carry the burden of hatred with the pain of loss. And that last statement talks about forgiveness and moving forward and being private. And I think that's why I'm trying. I do believe that he and Melanie have done their best to move past all of this, to be parents to their children. But I don't know for sure. I'm not in their lives, and they're private people. So they're probably going to keep it private. So I'm going to look now on and see if there's any interesting updates on Twitter. How are you all doing? What do you all think? What has stood out most to you all in the trial so far, or maybe in Brendan's testimony today? Rhodes says, I hear a man that was loving his life, and it was ripped away by evil. Yeah. He is resilient. He has rebuilt. That is beautiful. I hope to see the state bring more of Chad's culpability. I feel that is lacking at the moment. I agree with you, She-Wolf. They do need to they need to help us feel like there's more of Chad in this than Lori. Brandon seems so sensitive and truly devastated by what has happened to so many people that he cared about or knew. His world hasn't been the same for quite some time. Very sad. Yeah, and he also he comes across as a very empathetic person too. So he feels not only the pain that he feels, but the pain, other people are feeling. That's just how he kind of comes across to me. I'm trying to see if there. Now this is a no. Yeah, I agree. Truth matters. There's nothing behind his eyes. It's basically blank. It's basically blank. I'm looking for one moment. Sorry, guys. I've been looking for something that I saw yesterday that I wanted to show you, and I just can't. I thought I saved it for you as a tab, and now I can't find it. I'm so sorry. I haven't been feeling well, so I'm not totally 100%, but remind me, please, was Lori diagnosed with anything mental health in prison? She was. I don't know that it was made she was actually assessed for quite some time because she tried to mount an insanity defense. She tried to go not guilty by way of insanity, and she tried to be found not competent to stand trial. So for like a year, she was assessed. She was in that status of not competent to hold trial. So that's one of the things that held up her trial for so long. So she was assessed for quite some time. I don't know if they actually, I think they did talk about her diagnosis. Let me look it up. Lori. She was diagnosed with delusional disorder and a personality disorder with histrionic and narcissistic features. This is, oh, they're back in court. Interesting. I thought they were going to be gone a half hour, but. Oh my gosh, where is it though? Okay, so they are sidebarring while I'm grabbing the the feed for you. There we go. Yeah, I've never heard that diagnosed, Johnny. Delusional disorder. But she was deemed not competent to stand trial for a bit, and then she was deemed competent to stand trial. She does think she's the queen of heaven. She thinks she's a descendant of Moroni. She thinks she's the daughter of Moroni and a direct line to Jesus. And it's said in more, in more of their culty terms than that, but that's what she believes. She's a translated being. It's probably pretty darn serious. Let me do a little research on. Yeah, Rhodes, I don't know if I totally agree with you. I think what happens is you can have a delusional mind that picks up on delusions and that connects to whatever is in their life at that time. So she had delusions regarding religion, and a lot of times delusion and delusions of grandeur have to do with saying that you are anointed to be higher up than anybody else, to have more power. So that's a lot of times people who are going to be delusional anyway, they grab onto the thing that helps them with their delusion. Does that make sense? It might not. I don't think I said that very well, but like a belief system can be kind of off and delusional in and of itself, but then a delusional person can take it even further. They're having another long sidebar. I know Mormons, and a pair of them break majority of rules of a Mormon. They unalived innocent people and babies and put it behind a fabricated belief system that they were not practicing. That's what these people did, basically, allegedly.
Okay, we can have the jurors brought in.
Oh, good. Yeah, we were just talking about John Dehlin and yesterday. He has the Mormon Stories podcast. I'm glad they were talking about this. I didn't see it, but I should check it out.
Please offer the count for Your Honor. All right, thank you. Please be seated.
Yep, that's delusional. So
All right, we're back on the record on CR 2221-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell, continuing direct examination of Mr. Boudreaux, who's still under oath for testimony. I'll remind the witness, the jurors have returned, and Mr. Wood, you can continue with your direct.
Thank you. Mr. Boudreaux, when we left off, we were discussing an incident on October 2nd. And again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It sounds like you had testified, you had come to some opinion as to which Jeep was involved. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And you provided the VIN number of Tylee Ryan's Jeep to law enforcement.
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask state be allowed to publish State's Exhibit 9A.
As previously admitted, correct?
Yes.
Yes, you may publish it.
Mr. Boudreaux, do you recognize that vehicle?
Yes.
Do you know who that vehicle belonged to?
We called it Tylee's Jeep. I believe it was Charles's. I think he's the one who bought it.
But you were aware that Tylee Ryan drove that Jeep.
Yes.
Is that the Jeep that you saw on the morning of October 2nd, 2019?
Yes.
So as you provided that VIN to law enforcement, did you do anything else in regards to that shooting?
That day or when specifically?
Well, let's start with that day. Did you do anything else? Or let me ask this, strike what I just said. When approximately did you give law enforcement the VIN number for Tylee Ryan's Jeep?
That day.
Okay. And did you take any other steps or did you provide any other information to law enforcement?
I just shared with them who I thought did it and why.
All right. At any point after that first day, did you do anything else looking into the shooting that took place?
Yes.
What did you do?
After you go through something like that, it was pretty traumatic. It took me a little bit to realize that that a resolution wasn't just going to come really quick. Like the police weren't just going to arrest someone, a day or two later, and and then it would all be resolved. So I started trying to figure out things I could do to help assist law enforcement into finding who shot at me. That included hiring a private investigator, going back through any information I had, like old emails, the ones that Charles had sent me.
Okay, so let's talk about that. You said Charles had sent you some emails. When had Charles sent you emails?
He sent me emails. So when he and Lori were going through the divorce, he was sending out emails to the family with things he was concerned about, because he was very concerned about her mental health, and with things that pertain to this belief set that she was building.
Okay. And so that was during the period that Charles and Lori were separated. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And were you the only recipient of those emails?
No, he sent it to all of our family. So any of us who he considered family. So like Janice, Barry, Zach, Adam, all of us.
And so it's your testimony, you started going back through those emails.
I did, yes.
And what was the purpose of that?
I thought maybe if I knew more about what these beliefs were, that now apparently to me it seemed my wife had, and Lori had that I could, maybe I could try to figure out more of what was going on because everything was so bizarre.
And these emails that Charles sent, what was the nature of these emails? Was it a narrative that he was speaking about?
Well, in them, I found that a lot of the stuff was being sent by a Chad Daybell, who I didn't know.
And when you say stuff, what type of stuff?
There was like these documents that talked about like light and dark spirits, and it was like rating my family, like and myself, and then my extended family, like Lori's family, and things like that. There was invitations to some of these firesides and stuff like that. And information about them that I didn't consider firesides, things like that.
And did you provide those emails to law enforcement?
I did, yeah.
And did you see your own name written in those emails
I did.
with some type of, did you understand what that was? Like, you said some type of rating. How did you know it
Judge,
was
I'm
a
going to
rating?
object. This is becoming leading. And we haven't had a sufficient foundation to tell us what emails, date, time, place, year.
It's sustained as leading.
You had testified that you saw your name.
Yes.
Was there anything written next to your name?
At the a letter D.
After you provided those emails to law enforcement, did you do anything else?
I wanted to figure out more, so I got into Google and searched for Chad Daybell because I didn't know him. So I wanted to see more information about this person that was sending the information.
Right. And what did you find?
Um, when I typed his name in, an obituary popped up for a Tammy Daybell, and something inside of me was just shocked. I was just.
Did you provide that information to law enforcement?
I did, yes. I called up my detective, Ryan Pillar, at the time, and I texted him.
So just to clarify, you said my detective. Was that your private investigator or a detective,
He
law
was-
enforcement detective?
Sorry. Yes, he was the detective at Gilbert at the time that was assigned to my case.
Right. As this process went on, did you ever learn that Tylee, Ryan, and JJ Vallow were missing?
Yes. We were worried about it early on, and I often told Detective Pillar my concerns.
Did you ever learn whether or not JJ and Tylee Ryan had been found? I'm sorry.
I did. Sorry.
And do you remember when that was?
I got a call June 9th of 2020.
Where were you?
My parents' house.
Do you remember who called you?
I don't. I just remember somebody from, I think, Rexburg calling just to let me know that they had found what they were pretty sure was the kids.
Once you got that information, what did you do?
And the next day was my wedding, so I was getting remarried. So I got married, and
Oh my
shortly after
God.
that,
I forgot about that too.
I just felt like I needed to go up to Rexburg. I don't know what for. I just felt like I should, so I drove up there.
When you were in Idaho, did law enforcement ask you to do anything as it related to JJ or Tylee?
Yes, they asked me to identify JJ.
And do you recall where you were when that happened?
Where I was when I identified JJ?
Yes.
Okay. It was, I think, outside of Pocatello at an FBI location.
And do you recall the date?
June 11th or June 12th.
How did they have you identify him?
They showed me some pictures of him deceased. They asked me if that was JJ. And I said, yeah.
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
All right. Cross-examination.
And even the police are traumatized by.
No, I'm okay. We can go.
Don't be an asshole, Pryor.
You mentioned you had contact with Charles Vallow and Lori Vallow quite frequently. Is that right?
Yes.
What was the frequency with which you had contact with Charles Vallow from when you first met him to the time of his death?
It varied by the years. Sometimes when he lived close to me, I'd see him often. I could see him every week at some times, and then there was other times where he traveled for work, so I might not see him for a couple months. And they also lived further away, so sometimes I wouldn't see him as often.
They were nomadic. They never owned a house. They would just constantly rent. That's what I recall. I think you testified to that. Is that right?
I wouldn't use the word nomadic, but they definitely moved more often than I did.
Okay. And approximately the date you first met Lori Vallow?
It would have been in 2008. I was driving with my then fiance at the time from Texas to Utah, and we went through Phoenix, and I met the Cox family at that time.
Okay. And would you agree with me that Lori Vallow and Alex Cox had a very, very close relationship?
It was on again, off again. There was times where it was very close, and there was times when they wouldn't see each other very often, but
Well,
they knew each other very well.
well, are you aware that it seemed that every time Lori moved, Alex would follow her and move to where she would move to?
Not always. Yes, sometimes that did happen, but other times no.
Pryor testifying again.
More often than not, though.
It depended. Like there were times where Alex lived with in Arizona with us, and Lori left to Hawaii for a few years. But then there was other times I agree with you, where
Right.
They all moved from Texas to Arizona together and things like that.
And on the subject of Hawaii, during the time that Lori left JJ with Charles for that 2-month period, and I believe that was January and February of 19. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, it might have gone into March a little bit too, but yeah, that time frame sounds right.
And during that time, are you aware that she was residing and staying in Hawaii?
I don't know where she lived at that time. I didn't have any contact with her.
Okay. And at the time you were married to her niece, so you guys didn't discuss Lori's whereabouts as being in Hawaii for 2.5 months.
Well, my wife said she didn't know where she was.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that was true. I just know that's what she said.
Okay. Now, would you agree with me that Tylee and JJ had a very, very close relationship?
Yeah, I mean, they were brother and sister, so I would say they were close.
Well, more than that, isn't it true that for all practical purposes, Tylee was really like the second mother to JJ and caring for JJ.
It depended. I mean, she was a teenager, so there was definitely times where that wasn't the case. But there was also times where she was a nurturer for JJ. I mean, she loved him, but she was, like I said, she's a teenager, so
Right.
that was not her primary responsibility for sure.
But did you observe JJ looking at that in maybe a different perspective? That he relied on Tylee for a lot of things and things that maybe Lori wasn't providing for him?
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Did you observe anything to that effect?
And JJ was special needs, so I don't know that I could have identified that JJ could have. I mean, JJ needed every adult or anyone who was there to help him. You know, that's what he needed. And I definitely remember during that time when Charles had him, he missed his mom a lot. Charles brought it up in those same emails a lot, and it broke your heart.
And after Lori got back from Hawaii in March, early March, there was an attempt at reconciliation.
Yeah, they did try.
And at that point, did Charles confide in you that he actually was convinced by Lori to make Lori the beneficiary of his life insurance policy again?
Charles didn't talk to me about his life insurance policy. Charles did not talk to me about his life insurance policy.
So he never discussed with you finances or anything like that?
We talked about financial stuff, but he never talked to me about his life insurance policy.
So you're not aware that the life insurance policy was placed in Lori Vallow's name during this reconciliation period then, correct?
I would have no ability to testify to
Okay,
that.
okay. You brought up the subject of Melanie Gibb. And my recollection of your testimony is that you found it unusual that Melanie Gibb was there for Christmas of 2018.
Yes.
And I can't recall if you had said that they seemed to have a close bond at that point. How would you characterize their bond at that point?
Who's they?
Melanie Gibb and Lori Vallow.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it seemed like they definitely had a closer bond.
And are you aware of when Melanie Gibb and Lori first met?
I can't testify to when they met.
Did your wife participate in these gatherings in August, September, and October with Melanie Gibb and Lori?
I believe so.
And these gatherings in August, September, and October of 2018 were what you described as these fireside chats?
And I think they went past October. I think they were in November as well, in December. But
they started in the mid to early summer of that year. Is that right?
I can't say when Melanie's very first one was.
Okay. And were you aware that Melanie Gibb was the organizer and planner of all of these events?
I can't testify who planned them.
Okay. It wasn't your wife who was planning them?
I don't think so. It would have been without my knowledge.
Okay. And you found it unusual that Melanie was there at your Christmas holiday for what would be deemed a family holiday. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you happen to recall seeing a gentleman by the name of David Warwick at Christmas that year as well with Melanie?
No.
Okay. Now, you touched on a little bit about the temple, and I don't want to cover this too much, but in terms of the temple, what I don't understand is when someone goes to the temple in your faith, they do that as part of the marriage process in the beginning, right? To sort of the bond, it's a bonding, or you bond with each other, or I'm grasping for the word seal. You're sealing.
Mhm.
Is that the word?
There's a few things that you can do at the temple. You can go and do something called baptisms for the dead, where you can.
Well, I want to talk about, we'll get there in a minute.
Okay.
And I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time on that, but I'm, as part of the marriage process, you seal with each other as part of the marriage process when a couple first gets married, right?
Yeah, we have something where you can be sealed to your spouse for time and all eternity is what we call it.
Okay. And regardless of what happens, you're sealed, even if it means divorce or otherwise, right?
No, not quite. But
Okay.
I mean, we make promises to God.
Okay.
And with those covenants, if you keep those, we believe He gave authority to the person who seals you to be able to stay married even after you die.
Right.
But obviously, obviously, with any covenant, if you don't keep your promises to God, then you can break that, and it's no longer
Right.
sealed.
Right. And that's something that's important in the LDS faith is to keep your covenant to God, right?
I would hope for most people, if they believe in God and they make a promise with Him, that they would want to keep it.
So and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but the sealing is also a process in which you, and I'm trying to be careful about the way I phrase this, so correct me if I'm wrong. You stand in for somebody else who has passed away or is no longer alive, and you baptize them as a proxy for them. Is that kind of what goes on there?
Sealing or baptizing? Because you said baptize.
Well, sealing. There's a sealing process about being a proxy for someone who's passed on, right?
Yeah. So if I can be sealed to my wife here living, and that's something that I want to do, then I have that option. And for those who passed on, we practice in proxy is what we call it, but we practice the process of doing that for them so that it could be done here on earth, so that if it's something that they wanted, they could have that option in heaven.
So when they pass on, you're helping them move on to heaven. Is that really what that's all about?
The the process would be up to them to choose, right? But
Okay.
yes, we're going through the process here
Okay.
in behalf of them.
Well, you mentioned the baptism then, and that's what I'm a little confused about. So you baptize people who have passed on as well.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to beyond the scope of direct.
Overruled.
So
But Mr. Pryor, there needs to be some relevance as well, so it's
Okay.
narrow.
well, Judge, I think I'm going to move on. This was more curiosity than was anything else. So
Okay,
let's
then it's
move on.
not relevant if it's just curiosity, so.
Yeah, let's move on then. As part of these fireside issues, um, have you ever heard of an organization or a group preparing the people?
I have, yes.
And that's an organization that sort of caters to people of your faith about being ready for the second coming. Would that be fair?
I don't know if I would agree with that statement, but um, so I guess I would say no for me.
Okay, well, not for you, but in general, for people who are participating in those preparing the people rallies or conventions or firesides. Really, the theme is what to do after the second coming or preparing in case of an emergency, something of that effect. Would that be fair?
I've never been to something, so I can't testify as to what they believe.
Okay. Is that something that would be considered outside the realm of your faith or not something you should be looking into as part of your faith?
I mean, I think each person has to decide what they're interested in and what things apply to their faith.
But obviously, if there are some things that you're engaging in that are contrary to the faith, then you don't get to choose that, right?
The church can occasionally come out, right? They, like any organization, and say, hey, these are things that don't apply to our
Okay.
faith.
So having visions, have you heard about people who are blessed with the ability to have divine visions and be able to see events that are occurring in the future?
I have never had any visions, and I don't know anybody who I personally believe that I know personally who's had a vision.
Okay. And then having seances, like conducting a seance, is that something that your wife was doing as part of this back starting in the summer of 2018? Is she engaging in seances?
I can't testify to that because I don't know.
Okay. Did she talk to you anything about conducting vibrations and having vibration movements as
She-
part of these seances?
she didn't
Nothing
talk to
like
me about that.
Okay.
I feel like Pryor's trying to use words that are
And the
like
discussion of
taboo.
light and dark, you talked a little bit about Chad Daybell and that there was some discussion about light and dark, right? But
Yes.
that's not necessarily inconsistent with your faith. Your faith is talks about it in a number of your publications about light spirits and dark spirits. Isn't that true?
We don't talk about light spirits and dark spirits. No.
No, there's nothing in the faith that talks about light or dark spirits, right?
Nothing in what I've been taught. I mean, it's a large faith. There's a lot of information. So
Okay, so you're just not aware of whether that's taught in your faith or not. Is that fair?
I've been going to my church for a really long time and I've never experienced it.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
I think he's a great witness. Also,
Redirect.
The state has no redirect, Your Honor.
I think he.
All
has
right.
a
Are
great
there any,
witness.
is the witness perhaps can be recalled by the state or the defense?
Not by the state.
Not by the defense, Judge.
Okay, that concludes your testimony, Mr. Boudreaux. Thank you for appearing today. You're released from any subpoena. You may go ahead and step down.
And Judge, could we have a quick sidebar just on an issue?
Yes.
So thank goodness he is cut loose for this trial. But oops, he's going to have to testify in Lori's trial in Arizona. And people have been asking about when is Lori's trial in Arizona. My understanding, and I wrote it on a calendar. My understanding is that it's this summer. But let me just double check that. So it's scheduled to start August 1st. August 1st, I will definitely cover that trial unless a higher priority trial. It'll probably be streamed, Truth Junkie. If it is, I will cover it. But I'm not totally sure. Sidebar. Sparkles. There you go. Sidebar.
All right, the state can call the next witness.
State calls Officer Ryan Pillar, Your Honor.
Officer Ryan Pillar. It is a busy summer of trials. Would you all like
What
it
was
if
the
I
last name
published
again, Ms. Payne?
Pillar, Your Honor. Pillar.
Thank you.
Would you guys like it if I published like a calendar of the trials I'm following? Or planning to follow? I've been toying with doing that. The only thing that has stopped me is that things change so much.
About to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Okay, good. I'll work on something. I've been trying to think of the
Yes, sir.
best
Thank you.
format to put it in and best way to keep it updated.
All right, before I allow direct here, let me just inquire of the officer now that you're under oath. These trial proceedings have been live streamed and open to the public. Have you been observing any of the testimony that's been provided in trial up to this point?
No, sir.
Okay, and have you discussed with anyone else the testimony they've provided at trial?
No, sir.
All right, thanks for your responses. Ms. Beatty, you may inquire on direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Pillar, can you please state your full name and then spell your last name?
Yes, it is Ryan Pillar. Last name is spelled P as in Paul, Illar.
Where are you currently employed?
I'm employed with the Town of Gilbert Police Department.
And what state is the town of Gilbert in?
It is in the state of Arizona, Maricopa County.
How long have you been employed by the Gilbert Police Department?
I was employed February 2007 and have been with them for a little over 17 years.
Have you had any other law enforcement jobs prior to your experience with the Gilbert Police Department?
No, ma'am.
Can you briefly describe your training that you've had to become a police officer?
When first hired, I attended an 18-week Arizona Law Enforcement Academy, followed by an 18-week field training. And then I was a patrol officer for 9 years, where I received hundreds of hours of continuous training to include arrest procedures, state laws, firearms training, basic investigations and interrogations. In August of 2016, I lateral moved to our special victims unit within our criminal investigations division, where I was a detective and I received training in interview and interrogation, crime scene. I spent a week-long training with child crimes investigations. I also went to a week-long forensic interview training. In August of 2019, I lateral moved to our violent crimes unit, which is focused on investigating robberies, homicides, and violent crimes. I received another 5-day training with homicide investigations and interviewing techniques, as well as crime scene investigations. I'm now back on patrol work voluntarily and working within the school programs within Gilbert, Arizona.
So your current job title is you're an officer with the Gilbert Police Department.
That is correct. I'm a police officer.
What was your job title in 2019?
In 2019, I was a violent crimes detective.
Can you briefly describe your job duties as a violent crimes detective?
As a violent crimes detective, we investigated crimes that are related to violence, death investigations of any kind, homicides, and robberies, anything that would potentially lead to a death or a serious physical injury sustained to a victim.
Were you on duty as a violent crimes detective on October 2nd of 2019?
Yes,
Did you respond to an attempted shooting of a gentleman named Brandon Boudreaux that day?
yes, I did.
Approximately what time was that?
About 9:13 in the morning is when the initial call for service kicked out.
And did you go to a location?
Yes, 3875 East Phelps Street in Gilbert, Arizona.
And whose residence or what place was that?
It was soon learned that it was the residence of Mr. Brandon Boudreaux.
When you arrived at the scene, what was your role?
Upon arrival to the scene with fellow detectives, I took the primary investigator role, which is the lead detective for that particular investigation.
And when you're the lead detective of any investigation, what are your responsibilities?
Initially, it is to task fellow detectives with their duties, and then as the primary investigator, it's to interview the involved parties, in this case, the victims and witnesses.
Are part of your duties as a lead detective to make determinations about next steps and directions that the investigation should go?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, when you arrived at the scene on October 2nd of 2019, did you make contact with Mr. Boudreaux?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you talk to him without getting into any narrative or any specific statements he made to you? Did you discuss the incident with him?
Yes.
Based on your discussion with him, were you able to ascertain what had happened?
Yes.
Did you have any other discussions with anybody else at the scene or in the area?
Yes. Part of the duty, again, was tasking other detectives with canvassing the areas and speaking with witnesses. There was evidence at the scene to include in the roadway some shards of glass. Mr. Boudreaux's vehicle was parked in front of his residence. It had evidence that it did in fact sustain damage from a projectile. And witnesses at the scene confirmed a vehicle was idling in front of Mr. Boudreaux's residence prior to shooting occurring.
Okay, so let's walk back just a little bit. When you describe seeing Mr. Boudreaux's vehicle, were you able to ascertain where this shooting had occurred, where Mr. Boudreaux was?
Yes.
Where was Mr. Boudreaux when the shooting had occurred?
Mr. Boudreaux was driving his vehicle westbound on Phelps Street, approaching his residence.
And you mentioned that a projectile hit the vehicle. What do you mean by projectile?
Bullet.
Okay. And where was that bullet mark on Mr. Boudreaux's vehicle?
It was
It was a bullet.
up in the A pillar of the door frame, near the windshield. The damage itself actually caused the windshield, or excuse me, the front driver's side window to fracture, crack, and ultimately shatter. And then there was a hole within the B pillar.
And you personally observed that at the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
After discussing what had happened with Mr. Boudreaux and other individuals at the scene, were you able to get a description of a suspect or suspect vehicle?
Yes.
What was the description that you got?
From Mr. Boudreaux and witnesses, it was a darker color or gray colored Jeep that was parked facing westbound and eastbound lanes in front of Mr. Boudreaux's residence, or near the front of his residence. This Jeep was a Jeep described as a Jeep Wrangler, and specifically it did not have a wheel affixed to the back of the vehicle, which is standard for Jeep Wranglers to have a spare tire affixed to the back of the vehicle.
Did you learn anything about the license plate of that Jeep?
Yes, additionally, with the color and description of the physicals of it, it was described by Mr. Boudreaux that it was a Texas license plate that was affixed to the back of this vehicle.
Based on your discussions with Mr. Boudreaux and other individuals at the scene and the description of the suspected Jeep, were you able to take that investigation in any specific direction?
Yes.
And what was that?
From interviews and the vehicle description, I reached out to the Chandler Police Department detectives because it was learned that a homicide happened in their jurisdiction in July of 2019. So I'm
I
sorry.
apologize. Can you briefly tell the jury where Chandler is in reference to Gilbert?
Yes, Chandler, Arizona is adjacent to Gilbert, Arizona. We refer to it as a sister city. So it's right next to Gilbert within Maricopa County.
And you described learning about a homicide that had occurred in
Yes.
Chandler. What was the significance of that homicide to your investigation?
So upon learning about the Chandler homicide, it was learned that family members of Brandon's wife at the time, Melanie Boudreaux, were present at that Chandler homicide scene, as well as a couple vehicles.
And when you say Brandon's wife, Melanie, do you know what the status of his relationship with Melanie was at the time?
His relationship with Melanie Boudreaux at the time is marriage. They were married. They were in the process of a divorce that was near finalization.
Was there anything you learned about that homicide investigation or that death that occurred in Chandler that was applicable to this case, or the vehicle specifically that was at the scene?
Yes, the Chandler investigation learned that the decedent was a gentleman by the name of Charles Vallow, who was married to Melanie Boudreaux's aunt, Lori Vallow Daybell. Present at that scene as well was Lori's brother, Alexander Cox. It was learned that a vehicle at the Chandler crime scene was a dark colored gray Jeep with a Texas license plate that was registered to the decedent, Charles Vallow.
At that time, were you able to develop a person of interest with regard to that Jeep?
Yes.
Based on the information that you had as the lead detective, who was that person of interest?
Person of interest was Alexander Cox.
What further steps did you take in that investigation with regard to the Jeep?
From the Jeep information and the license plate that we've confirmed, we reviewed LPR hits. LPR is an acronym for license plate reader. And we were able to track the movements of that Texas license plate on that Jeep with photographs to confirm it was still on the Jeep, moving from the state of Arizona to the state of Idaho.
And did you determine what dates that had occurred?
Yes.
What were those dates?
Those dates were just prior to and after the shooting in Gilbert, Arizona.
Hey, teacup.
Were you able to determine where in Idaho the Jeep had traveled from?
Yes.
Where was that?
It traveled to and from the area of Rexburg, Idaho.
And were you able to determine whether or not Alex Cox had a connection to Rexburg?
Yes, it was soon learned that he was residing in Rexburg, Idaho.
Okay. At some time, did you begin coordinating with law enforcement agencies in the Rexburg area?
Yes, once it was learned the Jeep was located in the area, we reached out to Rexburg Police Department and Fremont County Sheriff's Office. Fremont County Sheriff's Office, sorry.
At some point in time, did yourself or any of the law enforcement agencies you were working with obtain a search warrant on that Jeep?
Yes.
When was that?
The Rexburg Police Department was able to locate and confirm the Jeep was at an apartment complex in their area, and they executed a search warrant in mid-November, November 18th.
Were you present when that search warrant was executed?
Yes.
Can you briefly describe what took place during the execution of that search warrant?
Myself and a crime scene specialist flew up from Arizona directly to Rexburg. We went to Rexburg's property evidence building where the Jeep was secured. I stood by with my crime scene specialist as she processed the vehicle. Processing included taking exterior photographs, opening the vehicle, taking interior photographs, and then she collected physical evidence to include DNA swabs in areas that would have the most contact by the operator, some physical items from within the Jeep, and then collected from the back of the vehicle GSR, which is an acronym for gunshot residue evidence, because we believe this vehicle to be our suspect vehicle and the shooting occurred from outside the back window.
And what did you do with those samples that you retrieved from the vehicle?
Hey, Kath.
These samples were packaged individually from each location where it was collected, and then it was ultimately impounded for evidence and then forwarded to the respective crime labs within Arizona for processing.
And did you have any more, did you do anything else with regard to the Jeep at that time?
No, once the Jeep was processed per the search warrant, it was turned over back to the Rexburg Police Department where it remained in custody.
At some point in time, did your investigation into the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux shift?
Yes,
Why was that?
because working with Rexburg Police Department, Fremont County Sheriff's Office, and Chandler Police Department still, as well as the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, it was learned that children belonging to Lori Vallow Daybell had not been seen or heard from for quite some time.
When did that shift occur?
It occurred shortly after the processing of the Jeep. It was late November. I believe it was November 26th, was when the focus really changed.
Did you take any steps on the Arizona side of things to locate these children?
Yes.
Can you describe those steps that you took?
Myself and fellow detectives began interviewing associates and family members of the involved parties. We set up surveillance to include pole cams, which is discrete cameras that are affixed to a light pole, for example. These cameras were located in only believed to have custody of, at this time, JJ and or Tylee Ryan.
In addition to the poll cams, did you do anything else?
Contacted other family members and associates.
Yes. Were you able to determine whether or not those children were ever in Arizona in November and December of 2019?
Upon review of all surveillance and all interviews, no, there was no indication either child was in the state of Arizona.
Now, at this time in late November and early December of 2019, were you still investigating Alex Cox for the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux?
Yes.
What did that investigation look like at that time?
Gilbert Police Department, as well as other agencies, were keeping our eye on Alex Cox. With my investigation in particular, we were tracking his movements.
I know, I apologize for interrupting. When was that?
This was in early December of 2019.
And you were surveilling Alex Cox?
Correct.
How often were you surveilling him?
It was learned that he was back in Arizona, Gilbert in particular, and we were surveying him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And in December of 2019, did you stop surveilling Alex Cox for any reason?
December 12th, 2019, yes.
Why did you stop surveilling Alex Cox on that date?
Alex Cox died on the 12th of December of 19.
After Alex Cox died on December 12th of 2019, did you execute a search warrant on his residence or vehicle?
Yes,
What day was that?
it was the same day of his death.
Did you find anything of evidentiary value in Alex Cox's home?
Yes, in his residence, he had multiple munitions and some firearms. He also had indicia to show that he lived in the residence, and identification, clothing items. And then he had some literature, multiple books of literature authored by Mr. Chad Daybell.
And did you find anything of evidentiary value in his vehicle?
Yes, there was paraphernalia to include holsters and ammunitions within Alex Cox's pickup truck. And there was a letter that was found also within his pickup truck.
What was that letter?
It was a patriarch blessing authored by Chad Daybell,
And who was it directed to? If
Alexander Cox.
I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
You may.
And Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
All right, before cross, just a quick sidebar with counsel, if I may.
Fair point, Chopper. Fair point. So this is going to sound a little, this is totally off topic, but have any of you watched the show Billions? Have any of you watched that show? Billions. It's a Showtime show. You can check it out on Netflix now. And the reason I'm bringing it up is, so this show has like 5 seasons on it. And what I'll do is it's a pretty good show. It's about a hedge fund manager and all the illegal shenanigans he gets into, and he gets in major fights with the U.S. attorney, who is his employee's husband. So it's a really good show. It's well done. But I had never watched it before, and it has 5 seasons. I like to not watch shows until there are several seasons out and then binge watch it. And that's what I just started doing with Billions. And you guys, I was watching it last night, and all of a sudden I see this guy that I used to work with on the show, and he's playing himself because the show is about, billionaires and venture capital and raising money and all this stuff. And this guy that I used to be a friend of mine, I'm not in touch with him anymore, but he, all of a sudden I hear his name said on the show, and then there he is. It was pretty surreal to see this guy that I worked with for about a year. And then I socialized with him a few times after that. Just show up in this in a fictional program as himself. It was really weird. I don't know if any of
All right, thanks, counsel.
over
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there's one issue I need to address with the witness and counsel
Uh-oh.
outside of your presence. In lieu of taking a full-on break, if we could just have you retire to the back hallway here for literally 5 minutes or less. We'll come back on, and then we'll take our lunch break at noon. So let's just have the jurors excused just very briefly.
very briefly. What's this about? Okay. What do you all think this is about? Is Pryor whining about something again? Is he anticipating some testimony here? Is it, this is not relevant because it doesn't have anything to do with Chad? Does he, it sounded like maybe there was an evidentiary issue.
All right, thank you. Please be seated.
Okay, spit it out.
directs concluded. Just very briefly, counsel, I was reminded at a former trial in the case versus Lori Vallow, one of the Arizona officers, and I'm not entirely remembering if it was Officer Pillar, but made some type of a kind and thanked the jury or something on the way out, which raised an objection by the defense. And I thought it was perhaps at least had the appearance of impropriety. So I just wanted to inquire and make sure that no passing comments were made at the conclusion of the witness's testimony to that effect, because we're just trying to keep the jurors as impartial as possible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's all I wanted to address, and we just didn't know a better way to do that with the jurors here. So with that, we'll just have the jurors brought right back in. We can continue with cross then, Mr. Pryor.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, so if the jurors can return.
So of course it was prior. And I'm not saying he shouldn't be bringing stuff like this up. So I guess the officer at some point had said something like thanking the jurors, but in the last trial. So the idea, I think the idea was when
All right,
you
thank you. Please be
don't
seated.
thank jurors.
All right, Mr. Pryor, you can commence with cross-examination if you'd like.
Good morning, sir.
You spoke about having coordination with the folks in Rexburg, the folks in Chandler, Arizona,
Yes, sir.
you at Gilbert, Arizona. Would you agree with me that the common denominator of all of these matters is Alex Cox and Lori Vallow?
For the Gilbert investigation, Alex Cox was our primary focus. Yes.
And Lori Vallow as well.
Yes, she came into play with being Alex's sister.
Right. And those are the ones that are implicated in the Gilbert, Arizona case. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then as far as Charles Vallow is concerned, the murder of Charles Vallow, are you aware that, again, it's Alex Cox and Lori Vallow who are implicated in the murder of Charles Vallow?
Yes, for the Chandler, Arizona case.
Okay. And the evidence that you found in the Jeep were two of Chad's books.
No books of Chad's were found in the Jeep. No.
That's it, right?
No books were found in the
Oh,
Jeep.
no books. were
No,
found.
sir.
Oh, okay. Judge, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, any redirect?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
All right, is this witness going to be recalled by the state or the defense?
Not by the state, Your Honor.
No, Judge, thank you.
Okay, you're released from any subpoena. Thank you for appearing and testifying today, Officer Pilar.
Sparkles, my understanding is that when he testified in Lori's trial, this particular officer, he thanked the jury as he was walking out. And
All right, before we
prevent
call
that from
another
happening again.
witness, the court has previously provided a limiting instruction in this case, and given the nature of both this testimony and the testimony of the previous witness, Mr. Boudreaux, the court is going to reiterate that instruction, which will be included in your final instructions as well when you retire to deliberate in the case. Ladies and gentlemen, during the course of this trial, evidence will be introduced for the purpose of showing that the defendant or an alleged co-conspirator may have committed acts other than those for which the defendant is on trial. Such evidence, if believed, is not to be considered by you to prove the defendant's character or that the defendant has a disposition to commit crimes. Rather, such evidence may be considered by you only for the limited purpose of proving the defendant's motive, opportunity, intent, plan, or absence of mistake or accident. So that's the court's limiting instruction. With that, then, is the state ready to call another witness before the lunch recess?
We are, Your Honor.
All right, you can call your next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would call Deputy Coulter Cannon.
All right.
Deputy Coulter Cannon.
solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give.
All right, now that the officer's been sworn, I'll just inquire on the court's exclusionary order. This trial has been broadcast and is available for public view. Deputy Cannon, have you reviewed or listened to or observed any of the trial testimony in this case since it began?
No, I have not.
Okay, and have you discussed with any other witnesses their testimony in the trial?
No, I have not.
All right, thank you for that acknowledgement. Mr. Wixom, you can inquire on direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Deputy Cannon.
Morning.
Could you please state and spell your full name for the record?
Yes, it's Coulter Cannon, Colter. Cannon is Cannon.
And where do you work?
I work for Fremont County Sheriff's Office.
What do you do for the sheriff's office?
Right now, I am a school resource officer, but I'm also a patrol deputy.
How long have you worked for the sheriff's office?
Approximately 10 years.
If you were to explain to the jury how many years as patrol officer exclusively and how many years also as a resource officer?
I've spent about 4.5 years as a patrol deputy and then 5 years in the schools. And then in the summertime, I go out to patrol. So
And briefly for the jury's sake, what does a resource officer at a school do?
mainly just handles any calls inside the schools that he patrols in, making the schools safe and secured and making sure nobody's there that shouldn't be there.
And what training and experience do you have as a law enforcement officer?
I graduated post academy, so I received my basic certificate. I've also advanced up into my intermediate certificate. And then I've taken numerous trainings throughout my years of service on different trainings throughout the years and continue that training each year.
Can you explain to the jury, what does it mean to have an intermediate certificate?
It just means that I've had so many years of service and then had so many training hours that I've been able to advance up into the certificates.
I want to call your attention back to October 9th of 2019. Do you recall if that's a day that you were doing patrol duty?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall whether or not you responded to a call involving a Tammy Daybell?
Yes, I did.
And based upon your recollection, what was the nature of that call?
It was put out as a suspicious call, suspicious circumstance.
Can you describe what you were told or what you understood that suspicious circumstance was?
Yeah, so that day I got a call of a gentleman that was at a residence that had pointed a paintball gun or a gun at a female in her driveway. So we responded to the area to check it out.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state would wish to play two different stipulated exhibits. One would be state's proposed 232A.
232A?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that is a 911 call from a Joe Murray. The second will be state's 232B, which is a dispatch call from Tammy Daybell, both of the same date.
All right, Mr. Priors, the defense had an opportunity to review these proposed exhibits.
Yes, Judge, I have, and there's no objection.
All right, so exhibit 232A and exhibit 232B are both admitted into the record. I presume those are each an audio file on a separate thumb drive. Is that correct?
They are, Your Honor, if I might offer them up just so the court can observe them.
Okay.
So, okay. I need to grab my laptop too. I've forgotten.
Okay, if you'll do that, I'll have the court clerk as well take a look at those. Okay,
I don't think I've heard a 911 call in relation to the Tammy incident. It could be my,
you want these returned to be published, Mr. Wixom?
If I may, Your Honor.
All right, I'll have the bailiff return them. Thank you.
once I hear it,
And
I'll-
Judge, I'm not certain if I heard the court rule or if I even requested, but are these exhibits admitted?
They are.
Thank you.
I mean, it's possible. Once I start hearing it, I'll know if I heard it, but I just don't have a recollection of this.
And for the record, the first exhibit that I will be playing is states Exhibit 232A.
But when they said it's a 911 call, they didn't say it was Tammy calling. They said it was somebody else. I could have heard it incorrectly.
Apologize.
There's a audio but there might be something of her.
Okay, yeah, we'll activate the podium microphone.
Thank you.
I agree, Shia Wolf.
All right, if you'd like to start it, Mr. Wixom, we should be able to.
Thank you, Your Honor.
911, where's the emergency?
Yes, so my mother-in-law who lives pretty close, had just gotten home about 10 minutes ago, was unloading her car, and she thinks a man, but she's not 100% sure she didn't see, because they were wearing ski mask, came up to her with a paintball gun, but they started shooting at her. It wasn't loaded, so it didn't, he didn't, nothing came out of it. But he kept asking what he was doing. He would respond, and then suddenly, after she pulled out her husband's hair, he ran off.
Okay, what's the address? Are you there? Hello? Are you still there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, now I can hear you. What's the address?
It's 199 North, 1900 East, Rexburg, Idaho, 83440. That's my address. She lives in the corner. I don't know what her address is.
Okay, I need her address. What's her location?
I think it's 201, I think is her address.
201 North 1900 East?
North, yep.
Does she know which direction he ended up running?
He headed east, back behind their house.
Okay, and did she give you a description of the clothing?
I didn't get one from her. I think all of that.
And what is your name?
My name is Joseph Murray.
Okay, is this a good look or a good phone number for you?
Yep.
Okay, I am sending a deputy out to your mother's home.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And for the record, Your Honor, I would next play 232B, the dispatch call from Tammy Daybell.
Very well.
Oh gosh.
October 9, 2019, 21 hours, 49 minutes, 20 seconds.
Fremont County Sheriff's Office.
Hi, I need to report something.
Okay, go ahead. What's the address?
Okay, at 202 North, 1900 East, the corner with the blinking yellow light on Salem Highway.
Is it a suspicious person?
Yes.
Okay, what was he wearing?
He was all dressed in black and he had a ski mask on.
And he said the blinking light now is where you saw him?
No, he's gone now because I pulled up into our driveway and I was getting stuff out of the back seat of my car and suddenly he was there and he had a paintball gun and he was and like he was going to shoot at me. And I kept asking him what he was doing because I could tell it was a paintball thing.
Okay.
And then he just kept doing it. So I yelled for my husband and then he took off running around the back of my house.
Okay, give me just 1 minute. Stay on the line with me.
Okay.
October 9, 2019, 21 hours, 50 minutes, 28 seconds.
And that was north 1900 East?
Yes.
Okay.
October 9, 2019, 21 hours, 50 minutes, 43 seconds.
You know what direction he was going?
He went behind my house and it's so dark out here and I just went in the house and got my husband and son and then they went out and looked and he was long gone by then.
Okay.
So he was on the north side of my house is where he went to get away.
Okay.
He didn't say anything or he just kept like he was holding the gun like he was, had a rifle and just shooting at me. So, but nothing came out of the gun either. So I don't think it was loaded.
Okay. And what is your name, ma'am?
My name is Tammy Daybell.
Okay. I will pass your information on to my deputies. We actually just had a previous call about this individual, so they're out in the area looking now.
Okay, yeah, I think it was my son-in-law who lived diagonal from us that called you guys already.
Oh,
so
okay.
Just wanted to make sure it got reported. So,
let's see. And what's your son-in-law's name?
Joseph Murray.
Okay, yep, it was him.
Okay.
So, all right, I have a deputy that will be out at your home here shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Deputy Cannon, do you recognize the information relayed in those two calls as essentially the same information that you were asked to respond to?
Yes, it was.
And can you help the jury understand, is there a difference when someone calls 911 as opposed to calling in dispatch?
Just a different phone number, I believe. I'm not 100% familiar with that. 911 is our emergency line, and then there's a non-emergency line that goes there as well.
What time of day or night do you recall responding to this?
It was approximately around 9:00 p.m.
And do you recall at that point in the year, was it dark outside or was it light outside?
The sun was going down. It was dusk.
And how far away from the address that you were given were you in your patrol when you first received the call?
I was only a couple miles away. I was in the Egan area.
And so was this the type of call when you were responding? Did you activate your sirens and lights?
I did initially activate my lights and sirens, and then when I got closer, I deactivated them.
Why did you deactivate them?
I didn't want the subject hear me coming or see me coming. I wanted to be able to find him.
And how long did it take for you to actually arrive at the address from the time that you were dispatched to the call?
It was approximately 6 to 7 minutes.
And what's the first thing that you did when you did arrive at that address?
I initially drove around the property, around the roads in that area, trying to look for a suspect wearing that clothing description. And then I went and made contact at the residence with Tammy.
Your Honor, at this time, would it be appropriate to stop for our lunch break?
Yeah, we're right at that time, Mr. Wixom. So if you've got some more direct, I would say yes.
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
Okay. Let's go ahead and take our lunch recess then. We're stopping just short of the noon hour, so I think we'll try to come back on if we can in an hour at 1 o'clock. So we'll be in recess until then.
All right, please.
And we will be at recess until then as well. So I think it's interesting. And by the way, I do now remember hearing Tammy Daybell's voice on that 911 call. So it had just been a long time ago. I don't think they played it though at Lori's trial. But I do remember hearing that call. I don't remember hearing her son-in-law's call. But I had a recollection that that Chad wasn't home, but obviously he was home. It was like kind of coming into evening time, and he was home. And if Chad was part of the conspiracy, it would make sense that he was home, because if he was part of setting that up, if he wasn't home when that happened, he would have been implicated if she was killed, right? So this way he could be home and have plausible deniability. But literally just 10 days later, that shooting was on October 9th. 10 days later, she died. And Chad was there. And I'm not laughing about that, but I'm laughing at I'm doing the ironical chuckle. It's more of like a fuck you kind of laugh. This entire case and situation is so infuriating and fucked up to me. How all these well-meaning, innocent people were affected by these two freaking greedy, lustful, freaking scumbags. So they will probably get into next then Tammy's death. And then they'll have to get into her being exhumed. And I know that I think they have already addressed her being exhumed in this trial. But it is possible, as Tiggy Girl mentions, that since Chad was there and she runs in and says, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. He was like, oh, well, maybe it was just a paintball gun, or maybe, and that was put into her mind. And then she calls the police and says, it looks like it might've been a paintball gun. She actually said factually, it's a paintball gun. And nothing came out of the gun. Nothing came out of the gun. So my point in saying all of this stuff, like I said, don't try to give the police information to try to help them solve their case or not solve their case, or actually give the benefit of the doubt to a person who's pointing a gun at you and shooting. Just give the police the facts. And it's possible that Chad was the one that distorted the facts in her mind and, put those thoughts in her mind. Oh, it was a paintball gun. It might not have shot. But there was no way for her to know that there was also another assassination attempt with the same car, with the same man in black who ran away into a, into a dark vehicle and ran off and tried to shoot at a person. That same exact incident had happened in another part of the family that Chad was fucking around with. Another person in the family that Chad and Lori had determined was dark. Right? There was no, no way for Tammy to know that. So when she is trying to give the police the benefit of the doubt on the behalf of the assailant, she's downplaying it in their minds. And since police in all these jurisdictions don't usually talk to each other, they're not going to connect that these things are all happening in the same family until it's too late, until people are dead. Right? What are the odds that Chad and Lori even met in the first place? Well, they did, so the odds are I'm not sure how to answer that question, Chopper, but anyway. So, let's all take a break. And when we come back, we will continue cross-examination of this law enforcement officer. And it's going to go more into the direction of what happened with Tammy Daybell. May she rest in peace. And may us not forget that is why we're here. It is justice for these lovely people. Tammy Daybell. JJ Vallow. And Tylee Ryan. That's why we're here. All right. I will see you all later. Thank you for being here. Please remember to hit the like button, and I will see you on the other side. Bye.